You're about to learn how to play the Scotch game so well, it feels like cheating. What makes the Scotch game so dangerous is you could get all the aggressive ideas without sacrificing a pawn early on, which means you could just play knight takes d4 here. This is the Scotch game. Two main moves that you're going to be seeing here is knight to f6 and bishop to c5. Sometimes persons take on d4, but that's just bad. After something like knight f6 or queen f6, you're just going to play pawn to e5. With that being said, after they play knight f6, I recommend that you just take the knight and then play e5 and attack their knight. And what I've learned is nobody knows that the main move here is queen to e7. And if they do play queen e7, you play queen e2, and you're still going to be chasing the opponent's knight around. What you're going to be seeing mostly is after you attack the knight, they play knight d5, you attack the knight again, they play knight b6, and then you just play bishop d3 and continue to develop your pieces normally. Now, after bishop to c5, one of your favorite moves is going to be bishop e3 because it's so easy for them to lose here. Like if they play knight to f6, it's already losing. You take the knight, hit the queen, and if they take back the knight, you're ahead by a bishop. However, if they choose to play the right move, queen to f6, we're actually not going to play c3 and protect our knight. We're going to be bringing them into something called Blumenfeld attack. Very aggressive. Because, okay, if they take the free pawn right away, this is automatically bad because we're able to take a free bishop. If they take the rook, we far get back their rook and we're winning. If they first take the bishop, then take the free pawn, we just play the move knight to c3 here. And we're actually threatening to trap the opponent's queen and we're threatening to win their rook. So a lot of times they try to escape with the queen. You just take on c7. Once the king move, here we don't necessarily have to take the rook. We just want to play queen d5. Well, knight d5, hit the queen, and development from here is very easy. Most people, they're just going to pull their queen back to d8, and this is where it gets fun because queen to g4 is such a strong move. And you're attacking g6. Let's say they push the pawn so you don't take. Just play knight c3. Even though your queen is on the same diagonal as their bishop, if they try to play something like pawn to d5, it's actually losing because all you need to do is move the queen to f4, and you're now still threatening this fork on c7. But there's also another little trick here. They may play knight f6, and then if you take on g7, they play rook to g8, and then now they have a good position. But you're not going to do that. You're going to first sacrifice your knight on c7, and that's already a fork. And then if the queen takes on c7, then you take on g7. You're forking the rook and the knight. Once the rook moves, you take the knight, and white is completely better. I want you to watch the full video. Apply the stuff that I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the Scotch game. It's very positional and aggressive at the same time. So it's one of those openings where we play b4 here, by the way. You're able to play aggressive without sacrificing a lot of pawns. Now, once they take, we're always just going to be taking back with the knight. If they don't take, then it's usually weird for them. Okay, he plays f6. Which is bad. Never play f6. Don't be playing f6. Because already he's exposing this diagonal pointing towards his king. I'm not necessarily seeing a way to punish him for this right now. Like if I takes, I have to get my queen on the diagonal. So let me just use the time to finish my development. And then he plays bishop to d6. Like, yeah, this guy's breaking all sorts of principle. Denzel from South Africa. So because he plays f6, principle number one that he broken, and then bishop d6 breaking another principle, I'm going to do the same, moving my knight more than once in the opening stage of the game. But why am I doing this? Because he played f6, the whole idea is for my queen to get access to the h5 square. Ooh, and then he plays pawn to g6. So pawn to g6 was not bad. He basically notices that I'm trying to put my queen on h5, and then he played pawn to g6 in order to prevent it. Now, I'm thinking about just sacrificing on g6 followed by queen to g4 because it's very hard to see how he's going to. Well, there's a simple knight e7. Another move I was thinking of is to, well, I'm definitely going to take because if I don't take, then he's going to take. But knight takes e5 is a very nice move that he needs to play here. Pawn takes is also an interesting idea. If pawn takes, I'm thinking about queen d5. Bishop takes is also fine. Queen to d5 threatens mate. Queen e7 prevents the mate. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. Like, I don't necessarily want to rush this attack because I know that his king is just never going to leave the center. Like, for one, he already played f6, so he's not able to castle. But if for some magical reason he's able to get castled, he's already moved like two of his pawns on the side that his king is going to be on. On to d6, and okay, it's not a blunder. I thought it was a blunder because it seems as if his bishop is trapped. So I wanted to play f4, but then he's able to check on d4. So let's just continue with normal development. Like, my knight is on the edge of the board. Eventually I'm planning on pulling it back to f3, but for now I'm just trying to finish my development as quickly as I can. And then he played pawn to a6. Now let's play bishop e3. All my pieces are now developed. My king is castled, which means it's time to start our attack. He needs to finish his development. I'm also threatening pawn to f4, which is just going to trap his bishop because now there's no bishop d4 because my bishop is just going to take, and he missed it, and he decides to play queen to e7, and I think that's because he wants to play bishop to e6. So let's just trap his bishop. Pawn to f4, the bishop is trapped. If he takes, I take. Queen takes is interesting, but I should be able to guard both my bishops at the same time. Look, what am I saying? The bishop is not trapped. He's able to take the, what am I saying? The bishop is not trapped, so now he's able to take on e4. That's kind of crazy. Okay, he didn't take on e4, which is wise because he's trying to get his king out the center of the board as quickly as he can. I'm gonna play the move queen to d3, guarding my pawn, but I'm also preparing for him to castle on the queen side. Like, if he castles on the queen side, he could be losing the game. But it seems as if he's trying to castle. So let's see. Like, we already spoke about these types of sacrifices on a6, but it will only work if he castles the king. On to g5, it would have actually been better for him to play f5 because the queen hits the knight on the edge of the board and the pawn hits e4. Now that he plays f5, I'm just going to play knight to f5 and hit the queen because if he takes, I takes, I have the bishop here. I'm also trying to open the e-file, especially since his queen is on the same line as the king. If he's not careful, he could be getting mated or losing his queen. And if he castles, I'm going to sack my bishop. So I think it's crumbling down for him now. So he decided to take on f5. Let's just take here. Notice how the e-file is open. I'm now trying to put my rook on this e-file, move my bishop out the way, so that way I'm able to pin his queen to his king. And again, if he decides to castle, I will be sacking my bishop. There's also a very cool idea of playing bishop to e6. So for example, well, okay, it's actually tricky now because if I takes check, he's actually able to play king to d7. So I have to prepare this sacrifice. Let's play rook to b1. Let's get more pieces in the attack. And I'm trying to either sack on a6 or check on e6, then take on a6 with the queen. So he plays rook to e8. Very good move, by the way, because he has two pieces attacking my bishop. But then I'm able to play bishop e6. Guard my bishop. Offense is the best defense, so I check his king. And it's funny, if he plays king to d8, he loses this pawn. But if he plays king to b8, he loses this pawn. Because as we spoke about, pin pieces does not protect. And the king is going to be on the same line as my rook. And if he moves his king there, I'm sure he's going to be getting checkmated. Okay, so he decides to put the king on d8 instead. Why castle if you're going to put the king back in the center of the board? The king no longer guards the pawn on b7, so let's just take the pawn on b7. And in some cases, you could see I'm threatening some checkmating ideas. For example, if this knight was not here, then rook to b8 is going to be a mate. I'm expecting him to move his queen out the way, so that way, whenever I try to check on b8, he just runs away with the king. But you guys have been saying this, and I'm now seeing it. Like, the guys at 500, they're playing some good chess. It's just some little simple weird stuff that keeps them at 500, especially the sudden blunder that they make. Like, they could be playing a lot of games, or they could be playing a lot of good moves, but then one sudden blunder just cost them the game. He just sent me a message in the chat saying he's beyond nervous because he's playing a CM. Come on, bro. Like, just play some chess. We're here to have fun. And by the way, I sent him a message on YouTube because he left a comment on my video with his username and his ELO. So I couldn't find someone who was 500. So I just searched my comments. I saw he left his username and the ELO. So I just messaged him. He responded, and we're now playing. Okay, he took on f4. I'm trying to get this knight. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. We're not gonna be moving the bishop. We're gonna be taking on a6 because for one, I'm now really threatening some checkmate on a8, and I'm attacking his unprotected knight. So if he thinks I hung my bishop and he's going to take my bishop, that's going to be a mate. If he moves his queen out the way, then my plan from there is to maybe check, king up, then I take, win the queen, win the knight, or just take on c6, then check, then take on c7. A lot of stuff I could do, but he definitely needs to put his queen somewhere so that way the king is able to run. Okay, he sacked the queen. All right, let's just take the queen. He sacked the queen. And then I'm assuming he's gonna take with the rook. I'm still not gonna move away my bishop because once I take his knight, I'm threatening some checkmating ideas on c7 and d7. Knight to e7 was played. Okay, he hits the queen. Now I have two pieces attacking c7, so let's just take. And once he moves the king, I'm trying to check. Okay, let's just check. Let's just check. This is called a skewer, by the way. I'm forcing his king to move. And then once his king move, I'm able to capture his rook. He moves the king. Now we just take the rook. I'm going to take on h7 next move. You know, I'm trying to win his knight. Yeah, this is just lost. I can even just push my pawns up the board and win. Okay, he took on e3. Let's just take on f4 for now. I'm trying to take on h7 with check. He checks. Let's just move. If he moves his rook away from guarding his knight, then he's going to be getting checkmated. Otherwise, I'm just going to take on h7 and eventually win his knight. Okay, so he moves the king. Let's not. Okay, that's a rook though. Yeah, that's a rook, bro. Let's just take the rook. Ooh, fork. But I check here. The king has nowhere to go, which means he has to block with the knight. It's not a checkmate though, because once I take the knight, his king is able to run. But after the king run, it's just a checkmate. More Scotch game against 600 players. Stick around. The opponent is now 600. Still going to be playing some more Scotch game. So e5, we hit the pawn. And then once the knight guards, we now play pawn to d4. Now, usually they take, but let's see. A lot of players at the lower level, they don't know that it's actually best for them to take. For example, pawn d6 should be good for me because he may lose a pawn once I trade the queens. So he did take. Let's take back on d4. And taking on d4, I'm probably going to see that. Knight f6 was played. Okay, he's developing. Let's take on c6. This is called the Schmidt variation. It spells weird, like S-C-H-M-I-D-T or something like that. Okay, taking with the D pawn, I was not expecting, to be honest. It's never good to take with the D pawn because now I'm able to trade the queens off the board. And it also prevents his king from getting the chance to castle. But you know, I guess the guy just wants to say, "Hey, at least I managed to get to the end game and I didn't lose." You know, but no, we're just gonna develop our pieces normally. And one thing I like to do when I prevent my opponent's king from castling, I like to castle my king and simultaneously check their king. So how I do that is sometimes I just develop the bishop to, let's say, g5. In some lines, I'm threatening to apply pressure to his pinned knight, but no, I'm just gonna castle and it's gonna come with a check. So he plays bishop e7. Now I castle my king, checking his king. And he basically has to play with an unsafe king and without his two rooks. Now, in terms of me checkmating his king, I do not think that is possible. But his king is just not going to be safe the whole game. He decides to block with the bishop. And now that the bishop doesn't cover this diagonal, I'm going to play bishop c4. And I'm basically attacking his unprotected pawn on f7. So he has to find creative ways to guard it, which he didn't. He played h6 to attack my bishop. And I mean, that's just a free pawn. I can't take it now because my bishop is hanging. So first, I'm going to be giving up my bishop for a knight. And then once he takes back, assuming with the bishop, then we take the pawn and we're already ahead by a pawn. So he took with the bishop. Now we take on f7. And the plan is actually to apply pressure to the pinned bishop now. Like if he allows me to play bishop to e6, it's just game over. As for example, a move like rook to f8 looks natural. You know, it gets the rook in the game, it attacks the bishop, but it loses because of bishop e6. He needs to get out of the spin. He did play rook to f8. You see? Now I play bishop to e6 and it's game. Because how is he going to defend the bishop? PP on the PP. It's very important. Maybe I need to make a shirt that says PP on the PP. That's what I'm going to do. So king to e7 was played. Definitely not going to take with the rook because it blunders the bishop. So let's just take with the bishop. Now we're just ahead by a clean piece in an endgame. So, just a matter of trading should win this alone. Okay, he moves the king again, finally trying to get his king to safety. I'm going to play bishop to f5 to cover some light squares. But my main idea is actually to get my rook on his seventh rank. So king to g8, let's play rook to d7. What he just did, by the way, was artificially castling. So it looks as if his king castled, but he actually didn't make the actual move to castle. So he castled artificially. Rook to f7 is also a blunder, and he did it. It's like I'm predicting all of these guys blunder because once he plays rook these, first of all, bro, like you shouldn't be trading. Like if you're down in material, I understand if the opponent force you to trade pieces, but you shouldn't be going out of your way trying to trade pieces off the board. And this is a blunder because the rook and the king is now on the same diagonal on a light square. I have a light squared bishop on the board. So bishop e6 will win even more material. And keep in mind, guys, whenever you pin the opponent's rook, not just the rook, once you pin something, the goal is to apply as much pressure to the pinned rook. So we're not necessarily going to just take the first chance we get. For example, if he plays rook f8, we're never going to take the rook. The only time we take the rook is if he tries to play a move where he tries to get out of the pin, and that's when we're going to take the rook because we force him to use a tempo to do it. And then he plays rook to d8. So I guess we're going to take the rook now because it's free. I mean, he's also trying. I mean, the guy's just begging me to trade pieces. It's crazy. He's doing all. Okay. I actually thought bishop to g5 followed by rook to d8 was mate. I don't know what I was thinking because all my pieces are guarding that. But if he plays bishop f5, then pawn to f4 also blocks the check. I'm predicting every move that this guy's playing. Now I'm going to play pawn to f4. He's going to pull the bishop back to f6, and I'm going to take the bishop with check because my bishop is going to be on the same diagonal as the king. Okay. He plays bishop h4, but now once I play g3, he's going to pull back the bishop. And then I'm going to take the bishop, and that's going to be a discovered check. So he did play the move. Let's take the bishop with check. Now I'm ahead by 12 points, by the way. I mean, the king has to move. My rook is going to be under attack, so the opponent resigns. But more Scotch game against 800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700 for playing some more Scotch game. I'm not sure which flag is this. Okay, let's go knight f3, hit the pawn. Oh, Peru. Okay, knight c6. Let's go d4. And then we take on d4, and this is the Scotch game. Now, again, a lot of persons at the lower level will take on d4, and that's bad. Bishop to b4 is actually a very interesting way to play. I think it's like an anti-Scotch, where when persons do it, it's like they don't want to play against the regular Scotch. But after bishop to c5, now if I play bishop e3, there's queen f6, or I think it's best if I just take. Yeah, that's how I usually do it. I usually just take on c6 here, and then if queen f6, that's losing because I'm just going to pull the knight back to d4. So once he takes, here I just play bishop to d3 and castle my king. It's kind of tricky though. You have to be very careful because there's some knight f6, pawn d, knight f6, h5, knight g5, queen. Like these ideas are actually very tricky. I don't think immediate queen to h4 was any good though. But I still have to be a bit careful with that queen on h4. I'm just gonna queen e2, knight f6, queen e2, knight f6, knight d2, knight g4, and then I'm not able to guard f2. So those are the things that we have to be aware of. Pawn g3, pawn g3. Hmm. Okay, let's just play queen e2. If knight f6, I should be able to just castle my king. And if knight g4, I should be able to play h3. So he decides to play the move d5 quickly, but that has to be a mistake. Like his king is still in the center of the board. My pawn on e4 is just gonna take because my queen is on the same line as the king. So once I take it, automatically comes with check. So now he has to block the check, and then I'm gonna have the time to just run my king out the center of the board. Okay, 97, I am able to take a second pawn, but let's not be greedy. Let me get my king castled first. Like, I also need to play moves like, so he also castled. I also need to play moves like knight d2 to f3. Knight d2, there's bishop g4. Bishop g4, there's queen e4. Then he takes. I think it's actually best if I take, not because I'm greedy, but because if he takes on d5, it attacks my queen. So now if he plays bishop g4, I should be able to play queen e4. Bishop back to d6 is now threatening a checkmate, so we have to prevent that mate. There's pawn h3, but let's just play pawn g3. just because it gains the tempo. Now, I am slightly weakening my light squares, but I have the light squared bishop on the board, so it's not too bad. And I also need to ensure that I finish my development here. I'm ahead by 2 pawns temporarily, but the pawn on c6, I'm assuming he's just going to take unless I'm greedy and I play moves like bishop to e4. Like if I play bishop e4, I'm just making it hard for him, to be honest. I mean, there's knight d2, knight takes. Oh, let's play knight d2. He's actually not able to take the pawn. He did take the pawn. What move should white play here? Simple. The bishop is pointing towards the h7 pawn. Remember when we're attacking the opponent's king, we attack the pawns around the king. The knight is unprotected. Queen to e4. Attack the unprotected knight, and we're threatening a checkmate at the same time. Now, I'm not assuming he's going to try to save his knight and not look on his king first. So he's going to play something like pawn to g6, and then we're going to take the knight, and we'll be ahead by a piece. I take that back. The guy prefers to save his knight instead of his king, which means that's just a checkmate. More Scotch game against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's do some more Scotch game. D4 is where the Scotch begins. Now, as I've explained to you guys, when they take the pawn, bishop c4 is the Scotch gambit. The Scotch gambit is very aggressive, but this one you can get aggressive play without sacking a pawn. Pawn to d5, I haven't seen. I mean, that's also a very interesting move because taking this pawn, he takes this pawn. But let's take this pawn so that way I could possibly force him to pull his queen out early. And then once he pulls the queen out, I may play knight c3 to apply pressure to his queen. So let's do that. Bishop to b4 is the move that he needs to play here, which would be a very good move, by the way, because he's applying a lot of pressure to my position. But here I'm just going to play bishop to d2, just so that way I'm able to break the pin. And then once he takes, I'm going to take back. And yeah, this is just a regular equal position. But I'm not going to lie. What my opponent just played is a very nice way to play. It's either it's so strong or I just didn't react to it properly. And I mean, the moves that I played made sense. I took the pawn, pulled out his queen. Okay, now that he takes, we just have to take back. And then once he takes, we have to take back. And we're now going to be in an endgame, which is crazy. However, we're going to be in the end game where I have the bishop here. And my level, that's a huge thing. At you guys' level, that's not a huge thing. But let's see how I'm going to be using my bishop here to get an advantage in this end game. So if queen takes and then I play bishop takes, I'm expecting knight f6. And honestly, it should be worth giving up my bishop for the knight to give him a very ugly pawn structure. But let's see what happens. Okay, he plays knight to f6. Definitely suspicious. Definitely suspicious. Because what if I just take the queen and then once he takes, I take on g7? That's a pawn, bro. And then if the rook goes here, I just pull my bishop back. It's not like he's winning back the pawn. I'm still gonna castle and gain a tempo on his knight. Yeah, that's a pawn, bro. Like pawn in today's society, very hard to get. So when we get a pawn, we take pawn, and that's why the bishop here is good. Now he has to play something like rook to g8. I'm going to pull my bishop back to d4 to ensure that my bishop is centralized, and maybe e5, just castle my king and finish my development. So rook to g8. Let's play bishop to d4. Let's keep things simple. Castle the king, and we're ahead. I think white is winning. I mean, using the word winning it's a huge word, but or I would say I think white has a winning advantage because it's a bishop here plus a pawn. Plus his king is still in the center of the board. Even though mine is in the center of the board, I'm planning on castling. Okay, watch this. Watch what's about to happen. If I castle and then he castle, I think nah. Well, yeah, I think I'm able to take this pawn because usually they play b6 and then my bishop is trapped. But what I've learned is if I'm able to play bishop e6, then my bishop will not be trapped. It depends on the position though. Let's castle first and see. So let's say he castle, then I take b6 and then I check. Oh, it's gonna be a pawn because that's gonna be mate. It's gonna be a pawn. So castling was actually no, it's actually not mate, but it's bad for him. So that's another pawn. You see, the same bishop that he gave up is the same bishop that I have just taking all his pawns off the board. He's not able to play b6, which looks like a very natural move. But then I'm going to be able to check him on a6. Now, guys, please do not be taking these types of pawns unless you're 100% sure that you calculated very accurately. Because pawn b6 is trapping my bishop, and that's what he played. But this is now GG's. Wants to trap my bishop, and then he's about to lose his knight. Because once I check him here, the king is not able to move. So he has to put the king here. I'm going to grab the free knight, check, and then maybe he's going to play king to e6. And then from there, it's just chess. So let's play check. And by the way, my bishop is still trapped. So maybe he's going to win the bishop, but then I'm going to take a pawn for it. So I'm still going to have like 3 extra pawns. Like king to d7 is not just forced, by the way. So he did play king to d7. Now we take on d5 with check. Let's check the king. And now he has to play king to e6 if he wants to at least try to win back this bishop. King e6 to guard his bishop. We trade the rooks off the board because we're ahead by so many material. And then we're ahead by 5 points. I'm assuming that I'm going to lose this bishop because it's trapped. But first, I'm going to take this bishop, check the king, so that way once the rook goes here, it's not like skewering both of my bishop. If he makes the mistake and puts his king here, then I check, trade the rooks off the board, and that's GG's. So where is he going to put the king? F6. Okay, what if he plays king f6? So he did play king f6. I am just not seeing a way to save my bishop. So instead of being ahead by 5 points, I'm going to be ahead by 3 points. Still a lot of points though, life is hard. Let's play rook to d1. I shouldn't even be playing a move like rook to d1 because it's kind of forcing him to find rook to a8 and trap my bishop. But he found it, and we're going to lose the bishop anyways. Might as well we take something for it. Now we're ahead by 3 points, but king and the pawn is on the same line. So that's also a fork, which means we're about to be ahead by 4 points in an endgame. This is completely winning for white. It's just a matter of rolling the passed pawns up the board. So he moves the king. Let's just grab the pawn. I'm also threatening to check and pick up a... Who's this guy's coach? Come on, Saul. Saul? Okay. What's this? That's a rook, bro. GG's. Okay, he pulls the bishop back. Let's just pin the bishop. Like, I can also sack my rook, then take on f7, roll my pawns up the board, and that should be winning. So he pulls the king back. Let's just sacrifice the rook. And then we're going to be taking on f7 here. And that should just... Yeah, this should conclude the game. And he resigns. More Scotch game against 900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900, and we're still going to be playing some Scotch game with knight f3 and then pawn to d4. Now, most persons are going to be taking on d4, and then once they take on d4, we just take back on d4. That flag is Pakistan. Nice. So once he takes, we take back with the knight f6 or bishop c5. Those are the moves that I'm expecting. Bishop to b4 is a very interesting way to play against the Scotch. Whenever they do this, just play c3 to gain the tempo on the bishop, and then the bishop goes back to c5. This is like anti-Scotch variation, but once this happens, I like to just take on c6 because a lot of person thinks queen f6 is now strong, but we're actually able to pull the knight back to d4. Now, if they take with the pawn, we're going to play bishop d3 with the whole idea of just getting our king out the center of the board. What you guys need to watch out for is stuff like queen h4, knight f6 to g4, pawn h5, going for the fishing pole type of attacking stuff. He did play queen h4. Okay, now we're going to play queen e2 just to protect the pawn on f2. And then after a move like knight to f6, we're just going to get our king out the center of the board and everything is fine. Okay, so he plays pawn to d6. He's trying to develop his pieces normally. And I'm going to start by playing the move knight d2. I want to be able to play knight f3 and then just chase his queen out of my half of the board because it is very important that we neutralize his pieces. In addition to knight f3, b4 followed by knight c4 is also good. Now that he puts his knight on f6, I'm thinking about e5, just immediately attack the knight. And if he takes, we play queen takes with check, hits the king, hits the bishop has to block, and then we're fine. If e5 and then he plays knight g4, I take with check. And then once he blocks the check, I should be able to play knight e4, hit the bishop, and guard f2. So let's play e5. I mean, my king is in the center, but his king is also in the center. But my queen is on the same line as his king. So we have to try to start something here. So he did decide to take on e5. Now we take on e5, checking the king and attacking the unprotected bishop. So I'm definitely expecting him to block with the bishop. Now, once he blocks with the bishop, instead of castling immediately, I'm going to play knight f3 to gain another tempo on his queen. And then if he plays queen to g4, that's when I'm going to castle my king. And then he's not going to be able to immediately castle because he's going to lose his bishop. Now the c7 pawn is hanging. That's an idea, but let's not be greedy. So he did play queen g4. King safety is very important. So let's get the king out the center of the board. Now we're attacking the bishop. He's not able to castle immediately because he loses the bishop. I'm expecting bishop e6, so that way he's able to castle. But if bishop e6, I could take on c7, which still prevents him from castling, and that's why he played queen e6. But upon queen e6, this is still hanging, and I'm gonna take. I mean, okay, he's still actually not able to castle. Because if you castle the queen and the bishop is on the same line, and I'm already attacking the bishop, so rook e1 could win the bishop. Could. I mean, my bishop is also unprotected, so could. Maybe I'm going to win another pawn, like castle rook e1, let's say queen d6, and then I sack. Immediate queen d6 is very strong because he's hitting my queen and my bishop. So I'm basically forced to trade the queens off the board, but I'm the one who is ahead by the pawn, so I'm chilling. Bishop takes, now we check, keeping that king in the center of the board, even though we're in the end game. And then after bishop e6, I could go knight g5 to pp on the pp, but knight d5 to pp on the pp makes more sense because now not only am I hitting the bishop, I'm also attacking the unprotected pawn. Okay, he still decided to just get his king out the center of the board, so we're going to choose to just win the pawn. Now, to win the pawn, I'm going to take the bishop, and then once he takes, I take back because, simple counting. I have two attackers, he has one defender. I'm slightly behind in development, but once he takes back, oh, there's rook to e8. I didn't see rook to e8, bro. That's a very strong move, Mr. 900. Because now if I move my knight, I'm mated. Okay. Nah, that's actually a blunder. I'm sorry. Because the bishop is unprotected, I'm able to play bishop f4. And if he takes my bishop, I take. Now my rook is guarded. If he takes with the rook, I takes, take. Oh, but he's able to play rook to d8 and win back the piece, Mr. 900. If that happens, though, then I'm just going to sack the bishop for a pawn and I'm going to be ahead by 2 pawns. So I should still be fine. But that's not bad. He decides to play bishop to c5, but that's a piece, bro. It would have been best for you to just take back the piece because now he just gave me 2 pieces for no reason. And then he quickly traded. You see how quickly he traded the rooks off the board? That's out of frustration. Knight to d5 was now played, hitting my bishop. That's fine, though. Let's just move the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back. This is just complete winning. Okay, he plays h6. Let's play c4. Well, the opponent resigns, but more Scotch game against 1,000 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,000. More Scotch game. e5, we hit the pawn. Guards the pawn, we play d4. Now, once they take, we play knight takes d4. This is the Scotch game. And after bishop c5, remember to not take on c6. Remember, it's best to keep the tension. And if you're trying to play your favorite Blumenfeld attack, then you need to play bishop to e3. And then now once the queen goes to f6, that's when you play knight b5 because the queen no longer guards the f6 square. So yes, we're sacrificing b2, but if he takes on b2, there's just knight c3 and he could be getting his queen trapped. Bishop e3 is good, doubling up my pawns. I'm still threatening to fork. If he plays queen to h4 check, which he did, we play pawn g3, hit the queen. Taking on e4 is a good move, by the way, because it hits the rook, but he decides to pull his queen back to d8. So let's play queen g4 and attack his g7 pawn. Now, pawn to g5 I've faced before, and now we're seeing pawn to g6. But how does this work? Also, ensure that you're aware of this, that the queen is on the same line as the bishop. Well, that's fine for now. Let's just use the time to develop our knight, knight c3. There's a lot of ideas of knight to d5, by the way. So pawn to a6 was played, which is a very good move. Usually when they play a6, just pull the knight back to d4 and you should be doing fine. Now if pawn to d5, I'm going to play queen f3. Knight f6, good move, develops the knight, gain a tempo on my queen. And do we play queen f3 or queen f4? I'm not seeing a huge difference. Let's put the queen on f4. So that way, if the queen was on f3, at least he has plans of going bishop to g4. Now I'm just trying to castle my king, develop my bishop, maybe put a rook on the f file, and I'm fine. B4 literally does nothing at all. It doesn't attack this because my knight guards the square. Maybe he wants to play this and remove the guard or something. The plan initially was to just castle. So, okay, now if he plays c5, maybe I'm going to play e5. Maybe I'm just going to move my knight. He needs to focus on his development here, though. I want to play maybe bishop c4, rook f1, pawn d6. He's finally trying to develop. I'm going to develop. Okay, my rook is on the same line as his queen, though. So what if I push takes check? Okay, there's queen block and I have nothing. What if I play bishop c4 though? Yep, nah, bishop c4, there's b. Yeah, let's go bishop c4. If pawn b5, I pull the bishop back to b3, and rook f1 is what I want to do. I want you guys to notice, like, even though I'm trying to attack and I'm trying to play all of those forcing moves, I'm trying to incorporate it with ensuring that all my pieces are in the game. Because if all my pieces are in the game, it's easier to attack anyways. Okay, so pawn b5, we were expecting that move. There's no offense is the best defense type of business here. So let's just pull back the bishop. And if I'm able to play rook f1, that should out. I think that's winning because the queen is the only defender of the knight, and if he moves the knight, I take. Why is this guy not castling his king? Come on, bro. You're a thousand. Get your king out the center of the board before it's too late. He's lucky I'm not able to force him to keep his king in the center. But if he does some weird stuff, yup, and he did do some weird stuff. And I mean, at least I warned him. The only downside of what's about to hit him is I can't use the F rook because if I use the F rook, he's going to take here. So I'm actually going to use the D rook and do the same thing. I'm not just going to win his knight. I'm attacking your knight 2 times. You're only guarding it once. He's not able to add additional defense to the knight. And if he's definitely not able to move the knight, okay, maybe he's going to finally castle his king now. But oh my lord, there's actually something. Okay, I think there was there pawn c5 hit the knight, and then if the knight moved pawn c4 chop bishop? Maybe. The good thing is, I would have still won his knight, but now I'm actually seeing it here. Like, what if he plays c5 here? Probably I'm going to be forced to like sack the knight or something because I'm still going to be winning his knight. So it's still fine, but pawn c5 followed by pawn c4 is nice. Bishop to bishop to h3 was played. That doesn't work, bro. Like that literally does nothing. Because once I take on f6, your queen is gonna take back. So your bishop on h3 doesn't really attack my rook. I'm not gonna take the rook. I'm just gonna take the knight. And if he takes my rook, that's a checkmate. I'm not even gonna take his unprotected rook. So this is GG's. Okay, he has one last now. Does he have any more chances? Maybe queen f6, rook f6, pawn c5. Okay, rook f6, pawn c5, bishop f7 check. Once the king move, my rook and my knight is under attack. This is the only chance he has to play c5. I think I'm still going to be winning, but it's just the only chance he has to at least say he's playing and he's not down by an entire piece. And he didn't take the chance. He he decided to castle his king when it's too late. So now we're gonna take our chance. Where does that knight go? Can't go there. Can't go there. The knight is trapped. Funny enough, Funny enough, he's able to still play c5, but I'm just gonna take and then take. It's fine. I'm already ahead by a piece. It's gonna win me a pawn. Didn't even find c5. Okay, bro, let's just take. How do we take? How do we take? How do we take? Let's take the. I don't want to move my knight off d4, but it's just not the square for the knight because pawn c5 is always there. So I'm now ahead by 2 pieces. Okay, rook to e1 was played. He's getting his rook in the game. If I move my knight, I lose this pawn. I'm trying to play rook to f1, but that bishop is so annoying. Maybe if I'm able to get a knight here to attack the bishop. All right, let's play rook f4, guard the pawn, so that way I'm able to play knight d5, and it comes with some knight f6 threats. I need to find something to do with this rook. Maybe rook to d1. Yeah, I mean, rook to d1 is fine. It's the only file that I can use. Okay, king to g7, he found. Let's just play rook to d1. Let's just get all our pieces in the game. b5, okay, okay. And now I'm just trying to trade. Let's just get the pieces off the board here. Did I just blunder? Because my bishop is unprotected. Ay, ay, ay. I think he's able to play bishop e6 here, guys. Because if I take the rook, he takes and attack my rook. He missed it though. And he, in fact, just blundered because my bishop is now pointing towards f7. So it's only been guarded by the king, but I have two pieces pointing towards that square. So once I take his rook, now you could see that my bishop attacks f7. And it doesn't really matter how he takes back, I'm going to be able to take on f7, winning myself a pawn. He took with the rook. Let's just play rook takes. King has to move. And yeah, once he moves the king, I should use the time to get this knight in the game. So let's go knight d4, maybe knight back to f3. And I could also plan to put his king in a little mating net. It's gonna take too long though. Like knight is gonna be on f. Okay, he hits the knight, so I have to put it on f3 anyways. But the plan was to, if I'm able to magically put my bishop on g8, then rook h7 is gonna be made. But I can't do it magically. So rook f8, bishop g8, rook back to f7, rook takes. That's gonna take me too long. By then he's probably gonna mate me. So maybe he has to move the rook, and then I centralize the bishop, and I just keep bringing more pieces in the game. Remember, guys, if you're trying to play against me, leave a comment with your chess.com username and elo, so it's easier for me to also play these games. The reason why I'm able to post these videos so often is I have a lot of persons to play against now. So, okay, he pulls the rook back. Let's play bishop to d5. Because, for example, if I can't find someone who is 1200, I just check my comments. And if someone said, my name is Peter Griffins 101 and I'm 1200, then I just need to send you a message and be like, hey, bro, let's play a game. And eventually, once you see the message, you'll be able to play. Okay, he guarded his pawn. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to be. Maybe if a knight is here, how do I get a knight right here? Because if a knight is here, then that's mate. This knight, how do I get this knight here? Here, I'm not seeing it. Well, let's just get this knight in the game. Maybe knight f. Okay, I'm seeing it now. Knight f4, knight e6, knight g5, rook f7. And it's not a terrible plan because all the other of my pieces are doing something. But once I play knight f4, hit the bishop, and then knight e6, he's just going to take it. Then he plays bishop to f1. So now let's go knight f4. Okay, there's also h4, knight g5, then rook f7. There's a lot of ways to do this. Okay, bishop to d5. He's trying to trade. I don't care. Let me set up my little mate. Let's go h4, knight g5, rook f7. So once he take, I'm definitely gonna take back. Then I'm gonna go knight h5, rook h7. Very nice mating net. So he took. Let's just take back. Okay, he puts the rook on g7, so he's obviously okay. He's trying to play rook g7, and I don't want to allow it. Like knight g5, rook g7 is still winning, but let's actually play knight e6 to prevent rook to g7. Then I play knight g5, then rook h7. He only has 2 seconds on the clock though. So with that being said, we're gonna be playing more Scotch game against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100, and we're going to be playing some more Scotch game. Let's go knight f3, hit the pawn. And I think this flag is Portugal. Nice. Knight c6. Let's play pawn d4. And then once he take, we play knight takes d4. This is the Scotch game. So we're expecting knight f6 or bishop c5, taking on d4. Not good. Just play queen takes d4. And if they play knight f6, we play e5. d6 is like a very conservative way to play, but he's not really making a lot of effort to get his king out the center of the board. Let's go bishop to c4. I like to put my bishop on c4 because it immediately applies pressure to f7. And then I'm going to try to castle. Bishop e6 is fine. I mean, if I takes, he takes back. Don't see what I gain from that. So let me just get my king out the center of the board. And you guys know what I'm going to try to do now. I'm going to try everything in my power to keep his king in the center of the board. Shouldn't be easy though, because the only pawn break that I have is e5, knight f6. And if I go bishop g5, he just plays bishop e7 and castle. Unless I play e5 now, but then he takes, and then I take the knight, his bishop is under attack. And if he takes my rook, I take here. And if e5 takes, I'm applying pressure to his bishop. So let's try e5. I told you, someone's king is in the center. We have to try to open the center. You have to do, sometimes you have to do unorthodox stuff. Like, I mean, the regular stuff is just knight c3, bishop g5, but he's just going to play bishop e7 castle. And I don't think I'm winning. I think he's able to just take and then play queen d6, force me to move my queen, develop his bishop and castle. But when you put pressure on the opponents like this, they're more likely to get castled. So he took. Let's take back. No, not to get castled. They're more likely to lose. Actually, bishop Bishop to d6 is just even better. But if bishop to d6, okay, there's actually something that is happening. Can I play queen b5 and if pawn push I take? And then if bishop takes, I takes with check and then take back the bishop? If I check, he blocks with the queen though, but then I take it the rook. And then once, yes, see, I told you. I told you. I could have pulled the queen back to e2, but then he just plays queen e7 or castle. So now the king is unprotected and b7, the king is exposed, b7 is unprotected. We check on b5, hit the king, hit the pawn. If he blocks with the pawn thinking, oh, if he takes my pawn, I take his bishop. No, because now I take on c4 and the bishop is unprotected. That's what happens when people don't castle their king early. So he blocks with the knight, and before we take the free pawn on b7, let's just take on e6, hitting the bishop. And then once he takes back, which he has to do, I'm actually thinking about not taking the pawn and play queen h5 check. So that way, once he blocks the check this way, I play something like queen h6 and just keep his king in the center for longer. Okay, what do I prefer to do? That's a free pawn. That keeps his king in the center. What a decision. Check, block, queen h6. Yeah, let's actually try to keep his king in the center of the board. It's going to be a harder game for him to play anyways if his queen is in the center, if his king is in the center. So once he blocks the check, we play queen h5. Now, I'm not going to lie. For some reason, I feel as if I'm behind in development. I need to develop my pieces very quickly. After queen h6, I actually have a plan of playing bishop g5. So, for example, if he plays queen to e7, trying to castle on the queen side, bishop to g5 hits the queen, and then I'm able to develop. There's also bishop back to f8, but if bishop f8, I move the queen, hit this pawn. He did play queen a7. He's trying to castle on the queen side, but once I hit him with bishop g5, my bishop prevents him from castling on the queen side. My queen prevents him from castling on the king side. And that's why he plays knight to f6. Okay, okay, he still wants to just castle, but that's fine. We're gonna allow him to castle because the knight is pinned. The goal is to PP on the PP now. Well, shouldn't work actually. Because if he castles and I play knight e4, there's bishop e5. Maybe I could try f4, but then he checks. Hmm. God, bro, why would you play a6? I'm not even trying to put my knight there. The whole idea was to put my knight here. I'm still gonna do it because it's the only way I'm seeing to apply pressure to his position. If bishop to e5, queen h4 applies more pressure, but he's able to castle and guard the knight. So after bishop e5, f4 check, king over. Let's still play f4. And then after he checks, I play king over. And then I'm planning to play c3 to chase away the bishop. So it's the same plan. It's just a different day. It's just a different position. Check. That's a very good move, by the way. Now I'm going to play pawn to c3. Next move. So now that he castles, we play pawn c3. This is a removing the guard tactic. I'm trying to force his bishop away so that way I'm able to win the knight. So I want you guys to notice basically what transpired with this game. I was trying to prevent his king from castling. He kept his, well, he didn't willingly keep his king in the center, but there was some slight inaccurate move that he played, which caused me to try to keep his king in the center. That's basically me putting pressure on him. I'm sure there were ways in which he could have not gotten into this position. But it's always easier to attack than to defend. Okay, he played knight takes e4. I'm not sure why. I think he's just trying to check here, but I'm just gonna maybe he thinks after checking over knight back, he's gonna win my queen. I'm just gonna take your queen, bro. Because once you check, I'm just gonna sack. And even if you take, your rook is still gonna be hanging at the end. So now if I put my king here, my king is gonna be on the same diagonal as his bishop. So he's gonna play knight g4 and win back my queen, but that's not what's going to happen. I'm just going to sack the rook. And then now if he takes my rook, I take his rook, and this is now just completely winning. From here, it's just a matter of getting all the pieces in the game. Let's start with rook f1, hit the bishop. Once the bishop move, I'm going to take this pawn, and it's GG's. So he moves the king, another trick, because now if I take, he's going to checkmate my king. But let's just take on h7. Like, he's just trying to trick me here. I'm just going to take all his pawns, eventually roll my pawn up the board and win the game. Then the opponent resigns. More Scotch game against 1,200 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,200 and we're going to be playing some more Scotch game. Knight c6, we play d4. Once they take, we simply take back with the knight. And taking on d4 is usually not recommended unless they're trying to play queen to f6 followed by queen to b6. But that line is not good. It's an inferior way to play as black. But let's see what he's going for. If any piece, if a queen or a knight goes to f6, we're just gonna play e5. So knight f6, spoke about this. Pawn e5 is also very strong now because the knight does not have good forward moves. So he may have to pull his knight back to g8, which is just crazy. And if he puts his knight on the edge of the board, pawn to g4 may trap it. I mean, he could try to play bishop queen e7 and pin my pawn, but once I play something like bishop e3 or bishop e2, he's still going to be forced to move his knight. Well, he pulls the knight back to g8, puts his knight on f6 just to pull it back to g8. Let me just try to finish my development here. Let's go knight c3. I'm assuming he's going to play d6 and I'm going to play bishop f4, and then I'm just going to castle my king. So now he plays g6. He's trying to find other ways to complete his development. I mean, he will be putting his bishop on the same line as my queen, so I need to be a bit careful there. Let's play bishop to c4 here, though, targeting his pawn on f7, so that way once he plays bishop g7, I could at least consider playing queen d5, queen e7, though. Bishop g7, there's d6 that is also coming. Okay, let me just castle. I can't go wrong if I castle. And then he needs to play knight e7 and castle. Maybe I definitely should have played queen d5 because now I made castling a bit too easy for him, and knight c6 is also coming. Well, let's just keep developing. Bishop g5 pins the knight. There's ideas of taking the knight. There's also ideas of bishop f6. Likely bishop f6 though, because I don't want to lose my pawn. I mean, knight c6 is also interesting because if I take the queen, he takes my queen. But if knight c6, I'm going to just pull my queen back and his queen is going to be under attack. So now that he castles though, his knight is pinned. What if I PP on the PP here? Knight d5. Knight d5, there is knight c6, luckily. And if I take the knight, he takes my queen. But knight d5, knight c6, there's still queen d2. So I think I'm still better here. Whenever you're pinning a piece, ensure that you PP on the PP. It's very important. P on the PP. My bishop is also on the same line as his king, so there's no moving the f pawn. Any way he touched the f pawn, he's just gonna lose the game. Well, if I did move the f pawn, which means, first of all, I could take on e7 and check the guy's king, all right? Yo, this is crazy. Find what I'm about to play here. If you find what I'm about to play here, then you you have a chance of getting good at chess. But here's it. Knight takes c7. Double check. So the king has to move. Because my bishop is on the same diagonal as the king, and this is called the missing f7 pawn, maybe I need to do a video on all the different ways to attack the opponent's king or all the different tactical ideas that you can play, but that's what this is called. Now, once we take king over, we look for more forcing moves. Knight takes g6 check. The king cannot move, so he has to take with the pawn. We look for more forcing moves. Queen to h4, check. The king cannot move, so he has to block with the bishop. Queen takes h6, mate. So as we said, knight takes e7, double checking the opponent's king, forcing the king to move to h8. Now, once the king moves, we play knight takes g6, checking the king. We don't want the queen, by the way. The pawn has to take. Then once the pawn takes, we play queen to h4 check. The king is now not able to move. The bishop is able to block, and that's just a checkmate. Our opponent is now 1300. Let's play some more Scotch game. Knight f3 hits the pawn, knight c6 guards the pawn, pawn d4, and that's the Scotch game. Now, when they take, bishop c4 is the Scotch gambit. I've done a very nice video on that, which I'll probably do again. But once they take, we're just going to take back on d4, and this is the Scotch game. So bishop to c5, we play bishop e3, just guarding the knight, and we're basically welcoming the Blumenfeld attack here. Knight takes d4, I wasn't expecting. This is one of the ways in which black just tries to trade the pieces off the board. So once he takes, let's just take back. Maybe I'm even going to see queen f6 here, followed by queen b6. Like if you're a player who, it's like an unambitious way to play, basically, but I can't blame the guy, you know? If you're playing with the black pieces, you should try to play to equalize the position because first you have to equalize, then you try to win. Because once you're playing with the black pieces, you're automatically not in the best position. Now, queen to f6, if they play queen f6 or knight f6, just play e5 and attack their queen. You can always also just take the queen and develop your knight to c3. But personally, I like to just play e5 and hit the queen. Now, queen to b6 is usually the move that they play. So he did play queen b6, and this is where we're going to take the queen. Like, there's no way to say to take is a mistake. And if we move away the queen, we lose b2. So we're going to first take the queen, and then we're just going to use the time to develop our pieces. The good thing is, white is going to have an easier game than black, because, I mean, knight f6 is also bad. Maybe he's going to try, nah, d6 is bad because I take and his position is weak. So maybe he's going to try f6. But if he, okay, he did play d6 is bad, bro. D6 is bad because no once I take the pawn on D6 become a weakness. Not only is D6 weak, B6 and B7 is weak. So his whole entire structure here is weak. And I have so many ways to even keep his king in the center. Like I could check and then once the bishop block I take. I could check once the bishop block I play knight d5 threatens a fork. I could castle my king and automatically attack his pawn. I could play knight d5 which threatens a fork and forces king to move. Then I win a free pawn on b6. So I think that's actually the line that I'm going to choose. Yeah, let's play knight d5 because there's no two threats. Knight c7, which is a fork, and then knight b6, which hits the rook and the bishop. And white is now just better, if not winning. I think white is just winning here. So we saw king to d8 to defend against the fork. Now we take on b6, hitting the rook and the bishop. So the rook has to move. There's also no rook a6 because my bishop covers the a6 square. So once he moves the rook to some weird looking square, I was about to say I'm able to castle, but if I castle, I lose this pawn. I'm trying to think about it though, because castle if he takes the pawn, king b1, if he moves the rook, I take with check. King up, I take. Okay, let's just castle. I'm going to do it. Once I castle, he is able to take the pawn, but I'm able to play king b1 and attack the rook, which means he's still going to be losing his d6 pawn. And no, actually speaking, if he takes on a2, there's bishop c4, hit the rook. Because if, nah, that doesn't work. I wanted him to check and then I take back with the rook. But, I mean, it works, but I don't want my king on d2, to be honest. So if he plays rook a2, I'm just going to play king b1. So he did play rook a2. Now we play king b1, not allowing him to check on d1. And he still has to move the king. And we're just going to take on. We also don't need to rush to take on d6. d6 is just a very weak pawn. I mean, if I take on d6, king takes, I should be able to take the bishop. But the guy, he didn't invested any moves into his bishop though. Like I prefer to try to finish my development. Bishop to e6. Bishop e6 should be a blunder. It's not though. It's not a blunder though, but it should be. It's not. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take on d6 with check. And then after king c7, I take his bishop. And then once he takes, I take his rook. And then he takes my knight. And that's just a bunch of traits. I don't see what I get from that. With that being said, how about just bishop c4? Hit the bishop. Once he takes, I take. His rook is under attack. And then I take on d6. Let's try it that way. Let's try it that way. So bishop c4 hits the rook and the bishop, cutting off the communication. Bishop now has to take. We take. The rook is going to be under attack. Maybe he plays rook to a6, but knight takes d6, threatens a fork. It threatens b7. The rook is on the same line as the king. I'm going to play rook e1. All my pieces are developed while his rook on h8 and his knight on g8 is just begging to be developed. So rook a6 was played, and here we take on d6. We're threatening all kind of stuff. We're already ahead by one pawn, but once this rook gets to e1, it's gonna be bad. He has to guard f7 though. I think he has to play king e7 because he also needs to move his king off the same line as my rook. But before I even take the free pawn, why not just play an in-between move, rook to e1, bringing more pieces in the game? If king to f8, that's mate, by the way. 1300 is not going to miss that. So he has to play king f6. King f6 is, I mean, look at this, guys. Do we take on b7 or do we play rook e8? The answer has to be rook e8 because it's best to ensure that he doesn't develop. If he tries to develop, he loses the rook. And I'm making it harder for him. If he wants to develop, he has to play g6, king g7, then move the knight. So maybe now he guards the pawn, but that should even lose if he, let's say he guards the pawn or move the pawn. I check and then once he moves the king, I play rook d8 and he's going to be losing the knight. Yeah, this is GG's. So he moves the rook. I still want to do what I said. Knight e4 checks the king. Oh, maybe he's just gonna sack his rook though. Maybe he's just gonna sack his rook. But who cares though? That's a rook. Give me the rook. If he takes, I take. I mean, at least he gets to develop his knight. I mean, he's basically playing without two pieces, by the way. So my advice to you is to just give me the rook, so that way you're able to develop your knight and your bishop. If you don't give me the rook, then you don't develop your knight and the bishop. So he did give me the rook. Let's take on e4. Knight e7 actually blunders the knight due to rook d6. So he puts his knight on the edge of the board. And now we're in the end game. So let's start attacking pawns. No need to attack the opponent's king anymore because we're now in the end game. We're ahead by 3 points. Once we take on b7, we're going to be rolling the connected pass pawns up the board. Pawn to b5 should not help. Let's continue to attack the pawns in the end game. He could try to counter attack my pawns, but maybe I should care, but I don't care. Because after takes rook down, I'm just gonna start rolling my pawn. Maybe I'm gonna change my mind though. Like that's how I am. I'm probably gonna change my mind. But for now, that's how I'm thinking. So he attacks my rook. Let's play rook to b7 to just confirm that that pawn is dead. He needs to get his rook in the. He needs to find some ways to get his rook in the game, but it's not helping him. So he plays knight f5. First, I'm gonna. Okay, let's just take. First, I'm gonna check. I don't. Nah. Yeah. First, we check, and if he blocks with the knight, I completely win the game by just playing rook to d6 and then sacrifice my rook for the knight because it's gonna be a winning king and pawn ending. Remember, guys, like if you're able to get into a king and pawn ending where you're mathematically winning, then the position is still winning. So he moves the king. Now we take, hit the knight. Maybe I'm trying to check here. Maybe I'm trying to play rook to b to h5, rook h5, rook a7, check the king, and then that's gonna be a mate. That's probably what I'm trying to do. If knight to d6, he loses the knight to check king over and then pin, and the knight is under attack. So knight d4. Now we play rook a5. That's the plan. Nah, doesn't work because there's knight e6. Doesn't work. I'm still gonna do it though. I mean, because if knight e6, rook a7, king f6, at least my rook is on the seventh rank, and it's easier for me to start rolling my pass pawns up the board. Like pass pawns must be pushed. Okay, rook c8. He's targeting my c pawn. He didn't move the knight, so now we check. King has to move. And then once he moves the king, I'm thinking, do we play c3 first, or do we just play rook b7? Generally, we don't want to be trading pawns in the endgame. We want to be winning them. But giving up the C pawn gives me all these pawns. So I think that's a good trade, and he has to take it. Nah, if he takes the C pawn, that's actually mate. So he could take with the knight, but that doesn't do anything. And he could still be getting checkmate on the seventh rank. Okay, so he moves the king. Let's just start grabbing the pawns. I'm just going to grab all these pawns. Maybe he's able to play rook takes now, but we really don't care about what's happening over there. The goal is just to take these pawns. So he hits the rook. Now we play rook to c7, and we're forcing the rooks off the board. If we're forcing the rooks off the board, then it's just GG's. I'm hitting the knight, I'm hitting the pawn. It's over. So he moves the knight. Let's start rolling the pass pawn now. That's a free pawn, by the way, and the opponent resigns. But more Scotch game against 1,400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,400. Let's play some more Scotch game. Now, the Scotch game is d4. Once they take bishop c4 is the Scotch gambit. The Scotch game is just taking back the pawn. And whenever they play bishop c5, they're applying more pressure to your knight. Do not take on c6. Like naturally, you should move the same pieces more than once in the opening stage of the game. So let's just play the move bishop to e3, developing the bishop and protecting the knight. Don't move the same piece more than once in the opening. However, the opponent just developed his queen early. And because he developed his queen early, that gives me permission to break some principles as well. What's the drawback of his last move? The queen no longer guards the c7 square. So what am I going to hit him with? Knight to b5. And this is the Blumenfeld attack. It's very, very fun. It's actually very, very fun. You guys are gonna like this attack. Okay, it's just so easy to lose though. That's the thing. For example, bishop back to b6 is just already losing because he's guarding the c7 pawn with his bishop. But I'm attacking the bishop. What happens if I take the bishop? It means the c7 pawn is no longer guarded. And because the c7 pawn is no longer guarded, 6 moves into the Scotch game, and we're already going to be winning a bishop or being ahead by a rook. So he took on b6. He's messaging me in the chat saying he wish he thought he would be more of a challenge. Now we take on c7, and that's just a fart, bro. And then once the king move, that's just a rook. I mean, okay, my b2 pawn is always going to be hanging, but and it attacks my rook. But once I play knight to d2, I'm chill. Now I'm just going to develop and castle. It's crazy. So queen takes b2 attacks my rook. The only way to guard my rook is to play knight d2. Like if I try to play knight c3, I lose the knight. So let's just play knight to d2 in this position. And knowing that my opponent is probably irritated that he's down by a rook, he's probably going to play knight b4, trying to regain his rook, or even knight d4. But I think in either case, I can always just develop my bishop to d3, guard c2, get my king out the cast out the center of the board, and then we're just chilling. He didn't. He played knight to f6. I'm still gonna play the move bishop to d3 because I'm still trying to get my king castled. Like knight c4 allows me to untrap my knight. And whenever you guys take someone's rook on a8, like don't expect your knight to always get back out. You know, usually it's gonna be trapped. But if you're able to get that knight back out, then it's just like so good for you. So he pulls the queen back, didn't really do much. Let me get my king out the center of the board. And knight f3 hits the queen, rook b1 puts the rook on the file. My plan from here is to get my knight back out of a8. If I'm able to get my knight back out of a8, I'm ahead by an entire rook. If I don't manage to get the knight back from a8 and then it's trapped, then that's fine. But based on this position, there's just no way to trap my knight. Like, how is he going to attack my knight? If he tries to play queen to a4, then b6 is no longer guarded and I'll take. Pawn to d5. The guy just played pawn to d5. And let me repeat myself. If your king is out the center of the board and the opponent's king is in the center of the board, your goal is to open the center. So why is he volunteering to open the center? I don't know. Like he already volunteered to give me a free rook. Now he's okay. Let's not be greedy. I'm gonna actually not. Okay, maybe he wants to play because I was planning on playing rook b1 to hit the pawn, but maybe he wants to play bishop g4. So let's just take on d5. Let's just open the center since he's begging for it. If I could trade the queens off the board, it's just GG's. Like I'm ahead by a whole entire rook. So he decides to take with the knight, really covering the b6 and the c7 square. Hopefully I didn't overlook that too much. But what I'm seeing is my queen is on the same line as his queen, as his king. With that being said, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit him with the move knight to f3, attacking the queen. Now, once the queen moves out the way, my queen is gonna be on the same line as his king. All I need to do is move my bishop out of the way and his knight is going to be pinned. So more than likely, I'm going to be moving my bishop to c4 or e4, and it's going to be automatically doing pp on the pp. So for example, queen to f6, he's not even guarding the knight once here. So I don't know which one of them is better. Like maybe bishop e4, maybe bishop c4. Let's go bishop e4, and then that's another piece. And one of my favorite thing to do is to check my comments and then seeing you guys saying, "Hey, bro, you missed mating too. You missed this free piece." Like it's kind of humbling sometimes, but you know, I like to see when you guys are able to see stuff that I missed. Bishop to d7 was played. Now I'm just going to eliminate the knight so that way my knight is able to escape. So let's just get rid of the knight. I'm choosing to take with the queen to maintain the pin on his bishop. Knight back to b6 will take the pawn, will win his bishop. It's crazy. I'm now ahead by 8 points. And we're only 16 moves in. But the opponent resigns. More Scotch game against 1,500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,500 coming from South Africa. Pawn e5. Let's hit the pawn. Now, once they develop the knight, we play d4. We already know about this. Everyone is going to be taking on d4. Anything that is not taking on d4 should be bad. So he took, let's play knight takes. Taking on d4 here is not good. The main moves are bishop to c5 or knight f6. And once they play knight f6, I like to take on c6. Now, d takes c6 is bad. B takes is correct. Now I'm going to play pawn e5, hit the knight. Queen e7 is the main move. Nobody plays it. So I guess he's going to play knight e5. So he did play knight d5. Now we play pawn c4, chase away the knight, and then we play knight c3. No, not knight c3. Then we play bishop d3 in order to get our king out the center of the board. So knight b6, we play bishop d3, putting the bishop on the same diagonal. Well, not necessarily same diagonal. It's like the same diagonal of where he's gonna get castled on. And whenever they play bishop c5, I had a nice game where I decided to play queen to g4. Because personally, I think bishop b4 check is a bit more forcing. I had some issues with this game though. Like I think I was forced to be down by a pawn. There was a mistake that I made that I'm not gonna be making in this game. So if pawn to g6, I'm going to castle. Bishop g5, he's going to pull his bishop back. So pawn g6, we get our king out the center of the board first, and then, oh, no, no, no. It's funny. He also decided to castle his king. I think it was better for him to play d5. And then once I move my queen, he takes here. But hey, okay, maybe I should try bishop to g5. No. If bishop g5, he's going to pull back to e7. I mean, maybe I could also try bishop to h6. Yeah, let's go bishop h6. Bishop h6 hits the rook, so if pawn d5 hits the queen, I just move the queen. Or if pawn d6 hits the queen, I just move the queen. So now let's just move the queen. Question is, where do we put this queen? Yeah, let's just pull the queen back to g3. His rook is now under attack. And funny enough, after rook e8, maybe bishop g5 followed by bishop f6 is a move. But I prefer to try to castle. Like, if I'm able to get my knight to e4 very quickly, that would be very strong. Bishop g5, if he moves the queen, knight here. If he takes, I go knight here. Let's try that. Bishop g5 hits the queen. He has to move the queen to d7. Then we go knight c3. If he grabs a free pawn in any way, we play knight e4 with some ideas of knight f6. So he moves the queen. It doesn't really work though, because there's queen g4. It just shouldn't work. It really just shouldn't work. But let's just develop. Let's just develop anyways. Queen g4 now is a good way to equalize. I'm not even going to use the word equalize because I'm not 100% sure how strong my pawn sacrifices. But usually, if the opponent has dark square weaknesses and you have a dark squared bishop, their dark squared bishop should be fianchetto. The fact that his dark squared bishop is right here shows me or tells me that my position is not too bad. For example, knight e4 here is already just strong. I wouldn't be surprised if he sack his rook. There's actually no queen g4 due to knight f6. Maybe he needs to move his queen and allow knight f6. But my plan is to play moves like knight f6, queen h4, threaten mate on h7, and if h5, I sack on h5. There's a lot of stuff that's about to happen. So he decides to take on e4. We were expecting that. Now we take here. It's still not completely winning for me because it's still kind of equal. Okay, how do we do this? How do we do this? I have the rook, but he has the minor pieces and pawns. My plan is to try to set up some checkmates on g7. I think he's going to reroute his knight to e5. I need to definitely get the rest of my pieces in the game. So let's play rook to c1 and hit the knight first. And I also don't want my plan to be too obvious. Okay, the guy just, why would you play bishop d4, bro? Come on. I guess if I take, there's bishop to a6, but come on, bro. That cannot work. Because if I take bishop a6, I take bishop f1, and then I take, you're willing to give up 3 pieces for a rook? That's how you like rooks? Yo, let's just take on c4. Let's just take on c4. So we took on c4. He pulls his bishop back to e5, hits the queen, and I'm not just going to play f4, hit the bishop. That's fine, because the bishop has to move. Okay, he actually has pawn to d5. I didn't see that move at all. But this should be fine. I'm ahead by 3 points. I'm going to take the bishop. He's going to take my rook. Okay, this is weird. How did I not see that? Okay, let's just take the bishop. He's going to take my rook. I'm ahead by 6. Once he takes the rook, I'm ahead by 1. But then I'm going to play queen to f3 because I need to be aware of my d4 square. I'm threatening some ideas here. I'm also threatening some ideas here. I'm ahead by a piece, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He just has a lot of pawns. The guy just has a lot of pawns. So, and I'm the only one with a dark squared bishop. So I'm going to play bishop f6, queen h4, queen h6. So bishop b7. Now we play bishop f6, and then my plan is now obvious. The plan is to play queen h4, followed by queen h6, and then just checkmate. So I'm assuming he's going to try to get his queen to the f8 square. So he plays h6. I think he sees what's coming. Eh? I think he sees what's coming. He just wants to put his king on the h7 square. I mean, there is rook to d1, which hits the queen. There's some sacrificial stuff on g6. There's queen f4. Okay, let's play h4 actually. I'm going for the king because I know that he's going to play king h7. So I want to play h5 and then pin the pawn. Now, if I play queen to f4 and he plays king h7, then h5 makes a lot of sense. Okay, he checks. A check that didn't do anything. Let's just move the king. That's fine. The funny thing is, he need his queen to guard the f7 square. So now he plays rook e1. Could be setting himself up for failure. I just don't think there's any good squares to put my bishop. I mean, there's bishop here, rook here takes. I don't really like that though. So let's just continue with the plan. Let's play h5. If he wants to sack his rook, that's on him. He's going to be getting mated. If he touches this pawn in any way, if he takes the pawn or play pawn to g5, it weakens the f5 square, and then queen to f5, which is what he did, will lead to a checkmate. Okay, queen f5, there's actually king h8. So what if I take? Now, let's play queen f5 first, because if the king still decides to go to f8, then I'm gonna take. There's also pawn to e6, which I probably missed because that would have been a nice discovered attack. The plan is just to check king over mate. So I think he has to check here. Now, if I check king takes, check king back, that's mate. If I check on g7, he has to go here. Okay, I don't want to miss any mate because every time I miss a checkmate, you guys are always commenting. So if I check here, he's gonna play rook takes. If I check here, he's gonna play king here. And then I check here, he goes back. No, I check here, king here, I check here on f6. No, he's not able to go back, so he has to go here. And then I check him on f5. He has to block with his rook. And then I take on f7. I'm not seeing the mate, but that should lead to mate. If I take on f7, no, if I take on f7, yeah, that should lead to mate. Let's check on g7. I'm not going to be missing anything because every time I miss something, I'm always seeing, I see my comments, I read all my comments. So king to f7, and then what we said is we don't want to check here because the king runs. So we want to check here so that way the king doesn't run, and we force his king on d7, and then we check on f5. Now the rook has to block, and then we take on f7. So he blocks with the rook, and as we said, we take on f7 with check. Now the king gets to run, but we take the rook and not leading to mate. Oh, I'm not gonna miss that. You see, I almost missed that checkmate. We don't take the rook, it's bad. Actually, we take the rook with the bishop. That's good. And then if the king moves, we check. And then once he blocks, we mate. So let's take. And if he blocks with the queen, we check, king over check, bishop lock mate. So this is GG's. We did not miss that checkmate. He moves the king. Now we just need to check on the back rank. Doesn't matter what he blocks with. We're just going to take everything. And that's going to be mate, which is why he resigns. More Scotch game against 1,600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,600, and let's hit him with some more Scotch game. Pawn to d4. Once he takes, we play knight takes d4 here. So there's two main moves that we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing either knight to f6 or bishop to c5. All the other moves are not usually the main moves. When they play knight to f6, I like to just take on c6 and then play pawn to e5. Bishop to d3 is also one way to play, but pawn to e5 is actually the more aggressive way to play. Because we're forcing the knight to move. The main move is queen to e7, by the way, but apparently nobody knows it. Let's play pawn c4, hits the knight, and then once the knight moves, it's time to continue with our development. Bishop to b4 check right now is interesting because I'm not able to block with the knight because the knight guards the square. I should be able to just block with the bishop though and then just trade and develop. But I'm sure knight d2 blocking the check is also a move because once the knight moves, I chase the bishop. He decides to just move the knight though, so let me just go bishop d3 so that way I'm able to just get my king out the center of the board as quickly as I can. Step to c5 was played. Personally, I think bishop b4 check. I think bishop b4 check is slightly better than that, but let's see. What if I play queen g4 here? I mean, queen g4 attacks an unprotected pawn. The most obvious way to defend it is by castling. If he castles, I play bishop h6, I'm threatening mate. How does he not get checkmated? He has to play g6. And if he plays g6, I take the rook and I'm winning. So, but the thing is, queen g4, let's go queen g4. Whenever you're going to be playing moves like this, just be aware that you are putting your queen on the same diagonal as the guy's bishop. So let's say he plays a weird move. Let's say he plays pawn g6 and defend his pawn, and I castle, pawn to d6, my queen is going to be under attack. So that's something very important to take note of. So he did play pawn to g6, which means his dark squares are now weak. Bishop to bishop to g5 will force him to play bishop e7. Then don't want to do all of that, to be honest. Maybe I should just castle my king. If I castle my king, he plays d5, my queen is going to be under attack. At that point, I don't think I have any good moves. So I managed to weaken his dark squares. Now I think I need to just get my queen off this diagonal. Bishop g5, bishop e7 takes, queen takes. Now e5 is under attack. Okay, I'm thinking between queen f4, queen f3, there's queen e7. That's the thing. But let's put the queen on f4. If I have to defend the pawn, then I'm probably going to play bishop f4. Because there's usually some tricks where if the queen takes the pawn, you're able to pin the queen, but it just doesn't work here. So queen e7 would be a very nice move. Queen e7 was played. Okay, queen e7, bishop f4, there's no pawn, there is pawn d6. If I take bishop here, takes, okay. Bishop f4, f6. I'm gonna sacrifice the pawn. Let him have it. Like, okay, he didn't take the pawn. The guy's like, I am not taking that pawn, leaving my king in the center. Because that was the whole idea. I wanted to get my king out the center of the board and then try to attack his king in the center of the board. Okay, so he castled. His dark squares are very weak at this point. So I'm thinking bishop f4 or rook to e1. Rook e1 is just a very natural move, so let's start with that. Bishop h6, I think, is I'm just trying to stay flexible. Like I want to play bishop h6 when it works, because it's just obvious that when I play bishop h6, he's gonna play rook e8. So that's also a little skill that you guys need to have. It's called flexibility. So he did play pawn to d6 now, seeing that if I do decide to take, then I'm just mated or losing the rook. But what if I play knight c3, allow him to take, then play knight e4, hit the bishop, with some ideas of playing bishop h6, with some ideas of playing bishop g5. I think that is nice though. I mean, worst case scenario, I play bishop f4. Bishop f4, pawn f6, pawn e6, bishop takes. Okay, I want to set the pawn. Knight c3, because I need to develop anyways. Knight c3, pawn takes, knight e4. Well, but then there's f5 actually. And if f5 and I take, there's queen takes. I don't have anything, to be honest. I really don't. So let's go bishop f4. Like, I need to play knight c3 though. Like, I need to connect my rooks. If I don't connect my rooks, things could get weird. The good thing is, the only move that I'm afraid of is f6, and f6 is it's just weird. It's a weird looking move. So he played bishop b7 to connect his rooks, but luckily, maybe he's worried about this pawn, but I had no intentions of taking that pawn. My development needed to be complete. Now that my rooks are connected, I'm actively threatening to take on d6. Knight e4 is now an idea. Bishop h6 is now an idea. Like, it always feels good to finish a development. For example, rook to d8, and the guy just blundered because he missed that my rook was on the same line as his queen. So once I take on d6, he's not able to just simply take back. And the good thing is my bishop guards d6 and my rook is now guarded. So once I take, now I'm able to take, bro. You missed that. So I think he's just trying to be very principled. And that's the thing. Like, if you just try to be principled, it's going to help you to make a lot of good moves. But, you still have to try to look deeper than that. Because now once he moves the queen, I can also hit him with knight e4, hit the bishop, and if he puts the queen on d7, I'm also threatening to fork his bishop and his king and his queen. So the guy's now in some real trouble. And if he puts the queen on d7, I can also play pawn takes c7, hits the rook. Like, it's crazy. It's just over now. So he decides to play the move queen to f6. That is a free pawn. Well, if I take, he takes my bishop and then he takes on f4. So that's a nice move by him. But the whole idea was to play knight e4 anyways. Now it's also a fork. Hit the queen, hit the bishop. So knight e4 is just winning. Like, the queen is able to go to d4 and guard the bishop. But I'm able to, no, there's no bishop e3 because I lose the bishop on d3. So he is able to play queen to d4. Okay, queen to d4. At least now I'm able to take on c7, hit the rook. But that's risky though, because my bishop is going to be hanging. I mean, he has to find queen d4. There's also another idea that I have. If queen d4, there's bishop h6. You see what I told you guys about flexibility? Now I'm going to play bishop h6. Because if the rook moves, there's ideas of knight f6, which is just completely winning. But then there's also some ideas of chasing away his queen to get my queen on f6. So bishop h6 now is just nice. Bishop h6, very nice move. I think it just wins the exchange. Yeah, like I think moving his rook is just out the picture. Like he shouldn't even think about moving the rook because if he moves the rook, I win the rook for free. So I think it's best if you just try to take back the pawn or something. Just give him the rook. Okay, so he decides to just take back the pawn. I was expecting that. I want to play knight f6 still. I still want to play knight f6. But then there's king h8. There's some ideas of pawn c5. Doesn't work though because the bishop is just going to take. I should not be in a rush to take that rook. Let's just be remain principle and get the last piece in the game. I'm also putting my rook on the same line as the queen. And I hopefully you guys know something that I see a lot. The threat is better than the execution. So just the fact that I'm threatening to take the rook is better than just take the rook. Now I'm also threatening to just force his queen away. You see what I'm telling you guys about? Now that he moves the rook, I get the rook for free. It's crazy. The threat is better than the execution. Now he moves the rook. Knight f6 check. Wait, can I get more? Let's say bishop f1 first. Bishop f1, literally all he needs to do is keep the queen on the diagonal. Because the move that I really want to play is queen f6. And once he's able to keep his queen on the diagonal, I have nothing. So let's go knight f6, king have to move. We grab the rook, and it's just game. That was the only move. Now we take the rook. Not only did I just win a free rook, his king and his queen is also on the same diagonal. So I'm also threatening to play bishop to g7, which would be a fork on his king and his queen. Okay. Queen to h. Oh, that's a nice move though. Queen to h4. He's threatening my bishop and he's threatening h2. Well, first of all, there's still this move check. If I check, there's king here. And if I check again, there's king takes. I think I need to check first. I'm going to check first. Once the king moves, that's when I'm going to take the bishop, defending h2, just getting rid of the bishop. And then once the rook takes, my bishop is going to be under attack. But at that point, it's just a matter of moving the bishop out the way. And then once I move the bishop out the way, I'm also going to be threatening some back rank ideas. So let's defend that way. You see, this is just to show you guys that offense is the best defense. Even though he's threatening my pawn on h2, the best way to get out of this is to not look on h2. It's not to play g3. Get rid of the bishop. No rook takes. I mean, his rook and his queen is on the same diagonal, by the way, so he has to play rook takes. Maybe he thinks if rook takes, his back rank is going to be weak, but there's king takes g7. So you have to play rook takes. Well, he took with the pawn, but we spoke about this, bro. Queen and rook is on the same diagonal, dark squares. Bishop back to f6 hits the queen, hits the rook, and this is where we conclude the game. We're already ahead by a rook, and we're about to win the other one. On to c5. Look at that. Offense is the best defense. Okay, that's fine. No, let's just take on h4. Take his queen. Once he takes my queen, I take his rook. And then once he takes my rook, I take his knight. And then once he takes my bishop, I take his bishop. And this is now completely winning. So he didn't trade, which is the right thing. But I just have too many pieces on the board here. So now that's a free pawn, but I'm going to play bishop to d8. Well, the opponent resigns. More Scotch game against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700, and let's play some more Scotch game. Knight c6, we go pawn d4, and then once they take, we're just going to take back on d4. No, none of all of those sacrificial ideas. Now, whenever they play knight f6, now this is hard to pronounce. I think it's called the Schmidt variation, but this is actually where we're going to take on c6. Yes, we're going to be moving our knight more than once in the opening, knowing that our goal is to play pawn to e5 to attack the opponent's knight, forcing them to move the same piece more than once in the opening. So once they play, queen e7 is the main move there, by the way. But once this knight d5 move is played, I'm just going to play pawn c4, just constantly forcing my opponent to move the same piece more than once in the opening. And then from here, I'm just trying to finish my development. Now, to finish my development, I'm just going to play bishop to d3. I'm trying to get my king out the center as quickly as possible. Bishop to b4 check. That's a good move because he's also trying to get castled quickly. I'm going to block with the knight, knowing that eventually his bishop, I'm going to be able to play a3 and attack his bishop. And a lot of person wouldn't block with the knight here because they're worried about getting double pawns. But what I like to remind people about is it's okay to get double pawns, especially if the opponent gives up their bishop here in order to double up your pawns. Okay, pawn to d5. There's the option of just en passant. There's also taking on d5, which is an idea here. If I take on d5, there's knight takes d5. And then if I castle, that's weird because I could possibly be losing a pawn. So let's actually take en passant. Let's take en passant. Now he's the one with double pawns, but he immediately undoubled his pawns. And okay, I'm not seeing any way to like try to keep his king in the center. If I check, he could always block with the queen. So let me just get my king out the center of the board, and then I'm going to try to play bishop to d2 here. Because once I play bishop to d2, it means if I play a3 to neutralize his bishop, he has to move his bishop, and he's more than likely going to be giving up his bishop for a knight. Okay, bishop to e6 was played. I have to be very careful, by the way. There's two pieces attacking c4. I'm only guarding it once. Pawn to a3 takes. He takes on c4, and that's very good for him. So I need to not lose my c4 pawn here. Okay, what to play to not lose c4? Maybe pawn to b3. Kind of passive, a move that I'm not really in love with. I don't really like to play defensive moves. But I'm still trying to play a3 next to attack the bishop. There's also a little idea. For example, if I play a3 and he puts the bishop, well, he's not going to put the bishop on a5 because that traps the bishop. If he puts the bishop on c5, I may still play b4. So if I play a3, I think it's very likely that we're going to be getting the bishop here. Okay, rook to e8 was played. The guy's playing pretty well, by the way. Now, before I play a3, think I want to play queen c2 now. There's always queen h5. That's not going to work. It's never going to work, I think, because he's going to play. Well, if I'm able to force him to play g6, it weakens his dark squares, though. Pawn b4, bishop c5 to d4. Let's play pawn a3. Let's remain flexible. Let's ask, are you going to be giving up your bishop for a knight? I'm sure he's not going to do that. Like, bishop c5 has to be played. It's kind of an uncomfortable move, though, because bishop c5 allows b4, and then he has to find bishop d4. Bishop c5, there's knight e4 hits the bishop, but there's always bishop d4. Bishop d4 is like very strong. So now let's take the opportunity to play queen c2. Let's connect the rooks with tempo because he's playing very well. I want to play knight e4, but he's always going to have the option of playing bishop d4, pawn h6, very good. There's bishop e4, which hits the pawn, but I'm assuming he's going to play d5. Okay, knight e4 can't be a bad move. It can't be bad to centralize the knight. Let's centralize the knight. He has to play bishop to d4, hits the rook. And then I'm going to play rook to d1, putting my rook on the same line as his unprotected bishop, the same line as his weak pawn, the same line as his queen. I mean, like, something could definitely come out of this. So bishop to d4 was played. Now we're going to play the move rook to d1, just getting the rook in the game. And the whole idea is to play with all our pieces. Okay, I'm not really a huge fan of that last move that he just played, pawn c5. It definitely solidifies his bishop on e3, on d4 though, but it weakens his d6 pawn. So now I'm thinking about ways to just get his bishop away from d4. So let's say bishop c3 takes, pawn d5 takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and then I'm able to play bishop to c4, and this queen is going to be pinned. So let's go with that. And it's not like I have the bishop here, so it's fine trading the bishops off the board. I'm trying to press for a small advantage here, and I think I have the opportunity of doing that. So once he takes, I play knight takes, and he's not able to play d5. That's the good thing. If he's not able to play d5, I'm going to do what is called fixing the weakness by playing bishop e4. And then once my bishop is on e4, he's never going to be able to play d5. And if he's never able to play d5, then the weakness is fixed. And then once the weakness is fixed, the goal is to start applying pressure to this weakness. I'm not sure why he played king h8. But I actually wanted to check on h7 before I put my bishop on e4. I think he knows about the idea, but I don't think you need to play king h8, bro. Now, I also have weaknesses. I'm not gonna act like I have no weaknesses. My pawn on b3 is slightly weak. So if I play bishop to e4, he's definitely going to want to play rook b8 and try to target here. Bishop to e4 is not necessarily a move that he's able to prevent, though. I think he wants to play d5, and then after takes, knight takes, bishop takes. He's worried about these ideas. But the thing is, if Oh no, he wants to play queen takes. So takes, knight takes, takes. He wants to play queen takes. But queen takes doesn't even work though, because there's bishop e4. But let's just play bishop e4. I wanted to remain flexible and start with rook d2, but let's just play bishop e4. Bishop e4 hits the rook. I'm never going to allow him to play pawn to d5. And this is now called a weak pawn. And it's very important that you guys know the definition of a weakness. So a weakness is a pawn or a square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. And I'm assuming you guys know that unprotected pieces and all of those stuff are weaknesses. Whenever the opponent has weakness, it's very important that you're able to fix the weakness. Fixing the weakness basically means preventing it from moving. It's not really important, but if you're like at a decent level, you also need to know the different types of weaknesses. This is called a backward pawn. Automatically, I'm thinking about knight b5 because a7 is unprotected. So knight b5 attacks a7. I'm assuming he's going to play pawn d5 though. And then if I takes, that cannot work though. That just cannot work. Knight b5, pawn d5. I take, bishop takes, knight takes. Pull the knight back to c3, and that's pp on the pp. If knight b5, pawn push takes, knight takes, bishop takes, pull the knight back to c3, and that's pp on the pp. And if I play knight b5, there's just no way for him to protect the weak d6 pawn. And I'm also threatening his a7 pawn. So I want you guys to notice how I won this game. And this is something I talk about a lot. If your rating is low, you're going to be able to win games by just not blundering, and that's the truth. It's one of those things where you say, "Do you want to get rich, bro?" Yes. Just make more money. That's how chess works when it comes to not losing. Do you want to not lose more games? Yes. Just blunder less. It's easier said than done, but that's actually the truth. If you blunder less, your opponents are going to be blundering more. However, I just rambled all of that to tell you guys that once you start getting to a higher level, you're going to have to start forcing the opponent to blunder their pieces. So now you're going to have to start putting pressure on the opponent. And that's basically what I did. I was able to recognize that just this move, pawn to, you see how subtle it is? Just the fact that he played pawn to c5, weakened d5, and weaken d6 because d5 cannot be guarded by a pawn anymore and d6 becomes weak. And how did I manage to win this game? I mean, the game is not over, but how did I manage to win the game? By fixing the d pawn and then by start attacking the opponent's weaknesses. Now he's thinking. I mean, the guy has a lot of stuff that he needs to deal with. Like, not only does he need to worry about a7 and his pawn on d6, he needs to worry about the fact that his queen is on the same line as my rook. So if he allows me to take on d6, that would also be a fork. For example, if he tries this, it's also completely lost. Because what he's seeing is like, okay, let me guard a7 and just move my rook out the fork. But that's lost. Because once I take on d6, my rook is on the same line as his queen. And because I'm attacking his rook, he can't move the rook. If he tries to move the rook, knight takes f7 is a discovered attack, and I'm winning his queen. So once I play knight takes d7, I think he has to move his queen away. And then once he moves the queen, I'm just going to take. Like, he has to worry about this threat. I don't know who told this guy to play king to h8. Oh, and by the way, guys, like when I'm playing against you, I don't want you guys to resign prematurely. Like, I understand if the position is lost, but the audience usually wants to see how the game ends. And I'm not saying you should just drag out the game. Like, if you're down by like two pieces, you can just resign. But if it's a slight advantage, for example, here, don't resign because the audience wants us to see how the game is going to end. So, Queen c7, let's just take the rook. And with that being said, I say this a lot, but if you want to play against me, you leave your name in the comments, your chess.com username, as well as the ELO. If you did it on my last video, it's fine. Do it on this video because I usually just check my recent videos to find my opponents. So knight c7 was played. Okay, now let's just get the rook in the game. Let's just play rook e1. All my pieces are now in the game. I'm ahead by 3 points. So winning this game should just be a matter of trades, to be honest. So knight d6 attacks my bishop. I'm just trying to trade pieces off the board at this point. So let's just play bishop to d5. My rook is on the same line as his rook as well. But if he takes my bishop, I'm not going to take the rook first. Well, maybe. Okay, bishop f5 is a good move. The guy doesn't want to trade, and I understand. He's attacking my queen. I can always take on e7 first, but to take is a mistake. Let's just play queen d2. Like, I don't think it's good for him to just move his rook off the file because he doesn't want to trade, because that's just going to give me like completely full access to the file. Okay, so he decides to trade. And let's just take back with the rook. The rook now has the file. I was thinking about taking with the queen. And I think they both was good. I'm trying to play queen to f4 though, to kind of pin his knight to his queen. His back rank is actually fine. Like I'm trying to find a way to say, hey, his back rank is weak, but his back rank is fine here. Queen to b6 was played, fair enough. I mean, the guy's targeting my weakest pawn on b3. And how do we defend this? Bishop back to f3 is one interesting way to do it. Actually, I'm gonna go bishop back to f3. Because if I play bishop back to f3, he's not able to take on b3 due to the drawback of the fact that he's going to lose the knight. But that's not the whole point. The whole point is he's not able to centralize his knight somewhere. He's not able to put his knight on, like, let's say, d4. If he's able to put his knight on d4, that would be good for him. But because he's not able to do that, I could also gain an advantage just by applying pressure to his knight. So king h7 was played. Now there's rook to d1. That's more attackers on the knight, which means he has to move the knight. And because he has no, okay, I was just about to say he has no forward moves with the knight, but now I'm remembering that my move has a drawback. It no longer guards the square. I was just up, okay. I'm just about to say everything. Okay, here's my thinking. Queen to f4 hits the bishop, applies pressure to the knight. But if I play queen f4, he takes on b3 and he attacks my rook. No, because queen to f4 threatens to take with check. So queen f4, if he takes, I take with check. Pawn to g3, then I'm able to take with check. So queen to f4, is that like a fork? I mean, if you give up your bishop for a knight in this position, that's fine. But let's play queen to f4. I think he has to play some queen move here to guard his bishop. And if he does play some queen moves to guard his bishop, can't I play pawn to g4? Yes, I'm pushing a pawn on the side that my king is on, but it attacks his bishop. And if he moves the bishop, he loses the knight. So let's see. So he did play queen to g6. Now I'm thinking of pawn to g4. Very nice tactic. It's like removing the guards, like I'm hitting the knight twice. He's guarding the knight twice. Playing pawn to g4. Obviously, if he moves the bishop, I'll take the knight. But he doesn't have to move the bishop because my pawn is pinned. But that's not my whole idea. If I play pawn g4, I'm actually threatening to take the bishop with my queen. So if he thinks he's trying to be cute and then I play g4 and he plays h5, I'm just going to play queen takes f5 and that's winning. So, okay, pawn to g4, there's knight c3. But that's fine. I don't care. Let's play pawn g4. Because if he plays knight c3, I'm still going to take the bishop. And if he takes my rook, I first take the queen, or once the queens are traded, I take the knight, and I'm going to be in the endgame with an extra piece. That's just completely winning. That's a nice defensive move. I didn't see that move. That's a very good defensive move. That's a nice defensive move. Knight to g4. That's nice. Okay. If I take, he's going to take. If I take, he's going to first trade the queen, takes with check. Once I move, he plays knight d4. Sack, roll. Okay, this should win. Let's take. It should win if I'm not mistaken because I'm gonna have a majority on the queen side, plus his king is all the way over there. I really hope I'm not making a mistake. But king to f1, I think he's gonna play knight d4, and I'm gonna sack. Now once I sack, his king is not able to come here, which means his king is not able to enter the square of my pawn. So once I play pawn to c5, this becomes the square. And once his king is not able to enter the square, then I'm win. He plays king back, but the king is just not in the square. Pawn push, this becomes the square. King's over, his king is just not in the square, which means I queen, and this is just winning. Okay, he moves the king. Now it's just a matter of just take, well, the opponent resigns. More Scotch game against 1,800 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,800. Five, let's say the pawn. Scotch game is what we're trying to play. So once they play knight c6, we play pawn to d4. And, it's just opening the center of the board. It's not really sacrificing the pawn. The Scotch gambit is very strong. Knight takes d4 is the Scotch game, It's safer and it could still get aggressive. And again, the main moves are knight f6 and bishop c5. If they play other stuff, then it's weird. For example, knight takes d4 just allows my queen to be active. Bishop c5 is a nice move. He's developing his bishop. He's applying more pressure to my knight. We're not going to be taking on c6. Never take on c6 in these types of position because queen to f6 actually threatens some very nasty ideas. So let's just play bishop e3, developing my bishop and protecting the knight. And we have seen queen to f6, which means we're going to be playing what should be your favorite line in the Scotch game, the Blumenfeld attack. So if you're playing the Scotch game, especially at you guys' level, whenever you see this, you should smile because they don't know how to handle it. So we already have the 1400 blundered by playing bishop back to b6. The thing is, I'm just threatening a fork. So bishop takes c3 is very strong. It's the correct move because now if I try to fork, I'm just going to get mate after he moves the king. So I have to take, and I have these ugly looking double pawns. But there's still this idea. Queen h4 is also a good move because it checks the king and it hits the pawn. But let's play the move pawn to g3 and attack the queen. And that's when he decides to pull his queen back to d8. I mean, queen takes e4 would have also been good, bro, because you're also attacking my unprotected rook on h1. Now I'm going to play queen to g4 and attack his pawn on g7. And then he plays pawn to g5. Interesting. Interesting. Pawn to g5 is interesting. Okay, I need to be aware of the fact that my my queen is on the same line as his bishop. Is there a world where I just play knight c3 here? And then if he plays d5, I just play queen f3. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play knight c3. Like, I'm aware of it. That's all you need to do. You just need to be aware of it. So knight c3, usually here they play a6 to hit the knight, and then I have to move away the knight, and then the knight goes to e5 to attack my queen. Okay, so he decides to play d6 now. Now we have to find somewhere safe for the queen. I mean, there is also queen h5, which it just looks annoying. It just looks annoying, to be honest. Queen h5, there's ideas of g4 though, which could get my queen trapped. If g4, there's knight d5, and yeah, his position is going to be more dangerous than mine. And if queen h5, knight f6, that's a free pawn. So I like queen h5. Let's play queen h5. If queen h5, pawn to a6, knight to d4, knight to e5. Actually, if he plays knight e5, he's threatening bishop g4. I need to be careful. I need to be very careful. If I allow him to play bishop g4, my queen is gone. What if I play bishop h3? Why am I playing so risky all of a sudden? Okay, let me just play pawn h3 actually, because I don't want to fall for any foolishness. Nah, this is too risky. Let's just go back. If pawn h3, there's knight f6, and if I take, there's knight f3. That's too risky. Yeah, let's just go back. Now, if he plays bishop g4, I'm able to play bishop e2. With that being said, it's best to not play queen h5. Don't play queen h5. That was just weird. Like right here, it would have been best to just pull the queen back in one move. Because putting the queen on h5, then pulling the queen back to d1, that's just wasting time. I literally just allowed the guy to play knight e5. I could have actually, like right here, my queen could have actually been on d1. And then when he played knight e5, it would have been my turn to play. But because I played queen h5, knight e5, queen d1, it's now his turn to play. So I actually lost a tempo just by doing that. And by the way, guys, if you're playing this gambit, if they do, they need to play a6 ASAP, which is what he did. Because otherwise, I'm threatening knight d5, and that's going to be a fork. And then when they play a6, we're obviously going to be centralizing the knight. Pawn c5, we should not be afraid of. I mean, there's knight f5 here. But what I'm trying to do from here is play moves like bishop e2, pawn c5 was played, and pawn c5 weakens his d6 pawn. I'm going to play knight f5, and I'm immediately targeting d6. Taking on f5, though, it's not the worst for him because he hasn't invested any move at all into this bishop. And I've invested almost all my move into this knight. I mean, I played knight f3, knight d4, knight b5, knight back to d4, then knight to f5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves. And because I played 5 moves with my knight and he only played 1 move with his bishop, it is safe to say I wasted 4 moves. But he also played moves like queen to f6, queen back to d8. He plays move like g5, moves like c5. So it's not really showing. His leading development is not showing. In fact, we both only have one piece developed after 15 moves of chess. Good thing is, my plan from here is simple. Bishop g2 to not get in a little fork. Queen to b6 makes too much sense because that's a nice tempo. That's how you want to play chess. Okay, offense is the best defense, so I'm not going to play rook b1 or pawn b3 or queen c1. That's weird. I'm actually going to play knight d5, and I'm going to say, bro, if you want to take on b2 and allow me to fork you, that's on you, bro. So I think after knight d5, he needs to play queen a5 check to regain back the tempo. And then I'm going to play pawn c3. And then it's just chess after that. So queen a5 was played. We're going to play pawn c3. Pawn to b4. Pawn to b4 is a bit reckless, but I like it. Because b4 takes. The queen is the only defender of the c7 square. So the queen has to go all the way back. And then I could play rook c1 threatening this. But then he castled. So Wait, nah. There's no queen d8 anymore. Pawn b4 takes. Where does the pawn b4 takes? The only safe square for the queen is a3. Well, I'm gonna check and then play rook c3 at that point, or even check and then play queen c7. Which means if pawn b4, he has to play immediate queen to a3. And by the way, guys, I'm not sure if you know how I am, but the whole time I'm doing this, I'm slightly uncomfortable because my king is still in the center of the board. So, and if you're not uncomfortable with your king in the center of the board, you're either a super GM who just has the best chess understanding, or you just don't know how to play chess. You have to feel some level of discomfort. If you're not uncomfortable with a bishop being on f1 just not yet developed, your king in the center of the board, then maybe you're a super GM watching this. Who knows? So he did put the queen on a3. The good thing is my pawn on c3 is just guarded, so I'm fine there. And if I take, he takes, and then that's opening too many lines towards my queen because the rook is on the same line as my queen. So what I'm going to do, being the principled player that I am, is to play bishop to g2. Unprotected pawn, yes, but it cannot be attacked. And you know what I love about my position? I'm able to develop freely. Let's watch him try to develop that knight on g8. There's no knight f6. There's no knight e7. He plays king to b8. Okay, king to b8 is decent, but what I'm seeing is the moment I take on c5, my rook is going to get the b file. I think he wants to take here. What if I takes queen takes rook b1? I like that move because there's still no knight that is going to be developed. Takes pawn takes rook b1, then he develops the knight. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. To take is a mistake. Don't learn to just take. Keep tension in the position. Now he plays rook to d7 because he's begging to develop his knight. That's what he's doing. Begging. Okay, there's knight b6 hits the rook. The rook goes back. Okay, knight d7 should be bad because takes, d6 is going to be unprotected. So let's just use the time to bring more pieces in the game. Let's play rook b1, putting the rook on the same line as the queen. Yes, I'm leaving a2 unprotected, but who cares about a2? My development is complete. He's begging to develop his knight. I'm not going to allow him to develop his knight. Even though it looks as if rook d7 allows him to develop the knight, it's losing. Maybe rook d7 is to protect b7, to be honest, because I'm trying to open the b file and attack him on b7. And the funny thing is, if he takes on a2, I may be able to play rook f2, rook b2. So he chose to play knight c4. Okay, let's look on the forward moves of this knight because you guys like to get... Okay, now I see why he played knight b4. He's just begging to develop his knight, and then if I takes rook takes, I'm not able to take on d6. Are we going to allow this guy to develop his knight though? I want to take this so bad. Isn't there queen to... Am I trapping this guy's queen? Nah. Rook b3, there's still queen b4, queen a4. So let's just play queen to d3. I mean, if queen d3, he's just going to pull his knight back. But maybe that's when I'm going to play queen to e2 and I gain a little tempo. Wait, but why not just play queen e2 now? No, I actually want to keep the queen on the d file. So let's try that. Let's play queen d3 because there's a lot of ideas of takes, queen d6. So I don't want to cash in too early of taking my queen off the d file. He has 2 more minutes than I, so I have to play fast here. And for some reason, I also want to play king h1, but I don't think king h1 is necessary. I just want to play it just to stay safe. But let's not try to stay safe. If he moves this knight away, it's not possible here because the only way for him to put the knight is e5, and then I have to move my queen. But I have ideas of playing rook b3, and if queen a4, there's knight b6 fork. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but that's an idea. Knight b2, I was not expecting at all. Knight b2 has to be a bad move, bro. First of all, queen c2, you have to pull back the knight. Queen e2, you can't even pull back the knight. Queen e2 forces you to put the knight on the edge of the board, and then now I play rook b3, and all of a sudden your queen is trapped. Queen e4 threatens to play queen to e8, picks up the unprotected rook, but queen to b4 is just way stronger because the knight can't go back, and if the knight goes here, the queen is trapped because the queen on e2 guard a2, and the queen just can't move because the knight is in the way. So this is the way. If knight back we take, I think he needs to just pull back the knight. But what's the chance of him seeing that his queen is about to get trapped and then just allow me to take his knight? So he finally decided to develop his knight. I guess he saw that his queen is about to get trapped. So we're just going to take the free knight. And then once he takes with the knight, we take on d5 and we're doing fine. Trading the queens off the board here is also very strong. But let's take, seeing that there's some possible attacks that is still on his king. At least he got the chance to finally develop his knight. I mean, it cost him a piece though. And then once I play maybe pawn e4 and then okay, there's queen takes c3 that I did not see. But I should be able to take. Or do I play rook b1 first? If takes, rook b1 takes, I check king over, check king up. That's too much calculation. Let's just play rook b1. Because now if he takes, I take, and there's too much attack on b2. If he push, I'm still able to take. So it's not like I think the best thing is okay, that's a move, but the plan was to play e4. Once this is under attack, we play e4. My bishop is doing the perfect role of guarding the pawn. There's queen to d4 check, and then I'm just going to move my king, and I just need to be aware. Let's just block with the queen. Like, why am I not trading the queens off the board and I'm ahead by a piece and my time is also running out? The funny thing is, I still have an attack on his king, and he should be the one who doesn't want to trade queens. Okay, rook to d7 was played. I'm still gonna trade queen, but wait. I was about to say I'm gonna takes, but I'm actually just gonna take. I was about to say I don't want my two rooks pointing towards my pawn, but he's about to lose this pawn. So let's just play rook d2 and then just take the pawn. There was also some f6 ideas. Okay, he wants his rook on my second rank. But let's play rook to d1 first. So that way, once I take and he puts his rook on my second rank, I play rook d2 and I'm just trading the pieces off the board. So pawn f6, we grab the pawn. Rook c3 didn't do much. Let's just play. Let's play rook d3 first to attack his rook. And yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted to get to the second, but I wanted to attack his rook because I know that he doesn't want to trade. And now let me just get my king in the game because we're in the end game, and that's what we do in the end game. Let's hit the rook again. I only have 40 seconds on the clock, so I have to play fast. Okay, now I'm just going to move my bishop out the way, and then I'm just going to take that free pawn on d6. I have two attackers. He has no defenders, so I'm doing fine. He moves the rook, doesn't help. Actually, it does help because he's able to check in the end. Let me just move my king, and then I'm just going to try to, let me guard the pawn first, run the king to these pawns. Okay, that's a pawn. Another pawn. Yeah, I need to play fast here. Need to play fast. Let's guard this pawn first. Maybe centralize the bishop, run my king to his pawns. That's the plan. We both have 30 seconds on the clock, but usually I'm able to manage my time. Okay, he moves the rook. Let's activate the king. Let's just keep activating the king. And eventually I'm going to try to trade off this rook. So he moves the rook. No, I'm going to play that move to trade off the rooks. I'm going to keep this guarded though. So I'm going to take with the bishop so I'm not losing this. And then my king just takes his pawn and I'm just going to promote. So let's just take. From here, it's just over. Still need to do it quickly though. Ah, that was a trick. You see, that was a trick. He thought I was pre-moving and then he lost his rook, which is why he resigns. But more Scotch game against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. Let's continue with some Scotch game. So pawn d4, they take, we take. That's the whole idea. Hopefully you guys were able to see some high level stuff here. Bishop c5 was played. We know that we should play bishop e3. And if they play queen f6, we play knight b5, the Blumenfeld attack. Queen f6 was played, and he's in our territory. Now, taking on e3 followed by queen h4, queen e4, and then queen h1. That's actually the best move. And then once he takes our rook, we try to take on c7 and then get the queen in the game and start some attack. Bishop takes e3. Let's take back on e3. And now c7 is hanging. I've seen a lot of players check, then go back. Some plays king d8. Taking on b2 is just bad. But what they need to do is check, push, takes, knight c3, and then they take on h1. He did play queen h4. Let's play pawn g3, hit the queen. And taking on e4, it would be very cool. He found it. It's actually very cool. So we're about to play a game where black knows exactly what to do. against this line. So it's gonna be fun. It doesn't mean white is losing or anything. It's just gonna be a fun game. So he took the rook. Now we take on c7 with check, forcing the king to move. And then once the king goes to d8, we play queen to d6, and we're now targeting the rook. Now, knight f6 is the obvious move here. It's actually a brilliant move, knight f6, because all the other moves are kind of bad and losing. And I'm just trying to get my king out the center of the board next. And remember, if you want to play against me, leave a comment with your Chesscom username and the ELO, and I'll send you a message. So he did find knight f6. Brilliant move, by the way. Let's just take the rook. And from here, the move is queen to f3, which is a very obvious move. But once he plays queen to f3, then I'm going to be forced to trade the queens off the board and then just play a normal position. So the position is going to be equal. But the reason why after queen f3, black is slightly better, because even though he took my rook and I took his rook, my knight is on a8. So if I if he manages to trap my knight, then he's just going to be ahead in material. So this will be a very interesting game. And he did find queen to f3. Yo, okay, let's just play queen to. I'm going to play queen to c7 before I play queen f4, because once he moves his king and I play queen f4, I'm kind of trying to get my knight back out of there. But what he needs to do is just take on f4 and then pull his king back to d8. And then, my knight could possibly get trapped. So he took on f4. Let's take back this way to have a good structure. I'm trying to get out of there. If he allows me to just get out of there easily, then white is actually going to be better. If he plays king to d8 and I castle, he actually needs to play d5 there. And it's a hard move to find pawn to d5, but if I castle and he plays d5 and I take, that's actually how he gets the advantage, because then he needs to play some bishop g4 move and hit my rook. But let's see, the guy's 1942 and he's from India, so I'm probably playing against a 3-year-old prodigy, and I don't know, but he played d6, which means my knight is no longer trapped. And if my knight is not trapped, then white is better, because well, maybe no, there's no rook e8. I was about to say rook e8, king f8, artificially castling, but he's also not able to do that. I'm gonna castle. He played a6, trying to prevent a knight from coming here, but my knight already patterned on the d5 square. So I don't even need to rush to get my knight out. So let me just get the king out the center of the board, so that way I could keep his king guarding d6. And by the way, if you're gonna plan on play the Blumenfeld Gambit, please watch this video and watch it again. This exact game, because everything that you just see Black just did, these are all the best moves. So if you're playing against someone and they play all of these moves, this how I responded to it was the best way to respond to the best move. All of this, including Queen f4, and then d6 was where he went wrong, and then that's how I get this little advantage that I have going on. Okay, Bishop g4 hits the rook. Let me just check the king first, just finally get my knight out of there. Eventually, I'm going to move my rook out of the way. But let's see where he puts his king first. Okay, he took on d5. Let's take back on d5 with check. You notice how offense is the best defense? Notice how I still haven't moved my rook? Now he just needs to move his king and then get the rook in the game, actually. Like, he's definitely not losing, for sure. Because rook e1, rook e8, and that's already an endgame. The only little thing that I could say I have is the fact that his pawn here is weak. King e6 is interesting. I wasn't expecting king e6. Now if I play rook e1, he takes. So I have to play rook to d2 to ensure that I keep the protection on my knight. But I don't think king e6 was good though. Like, rook d2 is an uncomfortable move, but I don't think that was good. Because now he's also not able to play rook e8 due to this fork. And it's very easy for me to play h3 and chase away his bishop. Okay, rook to c8 was played. There is pawn h3, but then there is bishop to f3. With that being said, let's play bishop to g2 first. I mean, at the end of the day, I need to develop anyways. I need to be careful. Maybe he wants to apply a lot of pressure to c2, but that's not going to do much for him. Knight back to e3 hits the bishop. That's a nice move. His bishop is almost trapped. For example, knight e3, bishop h5, pawn g4, bishop g6, f5 is a fork. Guy has to be careful. We got him. Pawn to b5 is GG's. The bishop is a nah. That is nah. Okay, knight e3, there's h5. What if I start with h3? If I start with h3, can't go here, can't go here. If the bishop goes here, there's g4. Can't go here, can't go here. And if he goes back, that's a fork. If h3, bishop back, g4, bishop back, that's a fork. So starting with h3 actually gets him. That's the move. We got him. So the bishop went back, we hit him with g4. Bishop goes back, we hit him with f5, and there goes his bishop. Now he has to sacrifice the bishop for 2 pawns, and now I'm just ahead by a point, apparently. Not an entire piece because I had to sack to get that, but this should still be winning. So check here, king is just going to move. If I check, he goes king here, and if I check, he moves. He wants to centralize his knight. I don't want none of that. Let's just give a check and just take that knight. I'm ahead by a piece. I don't want all of those drama. So once he moves the king, I'm just gonna get rid of the knight. Okay, king here I wasn't expecting. Taking on d6 is nice because I attack his knight even though he attacks my knight. Like I could take, but that's a pawn, sir. If I take, he saves the knight, and then I save my knight. I'm just not sure where I'm gonna put it. That's the thing. I'm just not sure where I'm gonna put the knight. If I take here and he plays knight e5, let's just simplify the game. If you're ahead in material, just simplify the game. It's harder for me to lose this with the extra knight. It's not easy to win though, because usually when I'm down by a piece and I have 2 pawns for it, I actually don't mind going into the end game if I'm able to have something like this, because now he just needs to roll the pawns up the board. But let's centralize the knight with check. If he if he plays king f5, that's just GG's. He's not gonna do that though. So I'm expecting king e5. And then I need to swiftly get my king in the game. So let's play, I mean, knight b4, there's rook here. Check, he goes back, so that doesn't do anything. Let's play pawn c3. He needs to start advancing his pawn majority. Every move that he makes that does not advance his pawn majority will get him into trouble. So pawn f5, if I go here though, and then the rook moves, and then I check here, and then the king move, I'm losing. Okay. Knight. Okay, let's go knight b4 actually. Let's just let him play rook b4. I don't think my knight belongs on d5, which is kind of weird. Okay, now I want to check here. Let's just check here. Force the king to move. Nah. Okay, guys, I'm not playing this endgame well, but that's fine. I think I'm still winning. I need to activate my king. So now he moves his king and he's threatening a5. Okay, I'm not really playing as well. That check was that did nothing. Let me just pull the rook back. If he plays a5, now I have to go back to d5 because I need the tempo. And then knight f4 and then get my king in the game. So again, for every time he doesn't advance the pawn majority, he's putting himself in problems. I need to quickly get my king over there though. So now if he plays a5, I can't go here, but I'm just going to go back. I'm in defensive mode here, which is fine, you know? And then he plays f4. Yeah, this is what happens, man. The guy watches my videos. Let's go king e2. h5, I have king f3, and that's a good way to slow him down from advancing the majority. And that's why it's very important to have your king being a very active and fighting piece in the endgame. Now knight d5 hits the rook, and then once the rook move, I go king f3. For some reason, my knight feels trapped. Nah, I don't like that. Let's go knight d3. Maybe knight d5 is good, but for some reason, it feels trapped. Oh, why am I not playing well? King here. Okay, king f3, pawn h5. Let's play. Hmm. Okay, let's play knight f2. No, king f3 first, and if pawn h5, then I play knight f2. And he's not going to be able to play g4, and I'm not even attacking anything. This is hard to win. Let's go knight f2. Knight doesn't really do well with pass pawns, to be honest, guys, but he has a minute 40 on the clock, so my win is guaranteed one way or the other. Pawn to b4, I check and pick up this pawn. Nah, because if I check, king moves. Wait, check king here, takes, and then rook here, and that's too much drama. So let's play c4, and then if he plays b3, I play a3. Remember, guys, we're not trying to trade pawns in the endgame. We're trying to win them. So even if he plays b3, okay, he plays a3. So now it allows me to check him on d5, and he has to defend well. And I think I'm winning now because it doesn't really matter where he puts his king. I'm going to hit him on e4. Now I have 2 pieces attacking g5. I have 2 pieces attacking d6. If he pushes a3, I play b3. And if he pushes b3, I play a3, which is why he plays rook to c6. But now I'm able to force the rooks off the board. And once the rooks are off the board, it's just a guaranteed win. And that's now GG's. So let's just take the rook. I also have a passed pawn. His king is in the square for now, but eventually the pawn will be rolling. King to f6. He's trying to hit the knight. I think I need to activate my king just a bit more. Yo, I have to be careful. I have to be careful. Roll the pawn. King over. Okay, let's just roll the pawn. King over, knight back. And if king up, I roll the pawn again. It's very important that I roll the pawn. Because once I roll the pawn, I'm basically trapping his king into this little box right here. The thing about it is, now that he plays king to f5, and this is why you need to understand your endgames, this is now the square that the king is in. Because the king is in this square, and I know that his king is trapped in that square, I'm able to take on g5, and that's a pawn. Because now if the king takes, he's outside of the square, which is why he resigns. More Scotch game against 2,000 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000. We're finishing off with a bang of a Scotch game. Knight f3, pawn to d4. And okay, usually everybody take on d4 here. I mean, unless this 2,000 rated guy is going to surprise me with pawn to d6. Pawn to d6 is not good, by the way, because once I take, and then take the queen, he's going to lose the right to castle or lose a pawn. So he did take, we're going to take back, and this is the Scotch game. Knight takes d4 is a move, but it's surprisingly not good because let me tell you guys something. So there's a principle in chess that says avoid developing your queen too early. But what that principle didn't cover is the queen is actually the most active piece on the chessboard. So if your queen is actually in the center of the board, it's very active. However, you don't want to develop your queen too early because it's very easy for your queen to be attacked by minor pieces. In this position, there's no minor pieces that is able to attack my queen. With that being said, my queen is actually doing fine. Usually when black plays like this, they're trying to play very solid. They're trying to get a draw. So I'm expecting to see moves like queen to f6, just trying to trade the queens off the board. And then usually I respond with e5, attacking the queen, and then they play queen to b6. Another interesting idea is to play knight e7 followed by knight c6. And it's just trying to chase away the queen, as you guys could see. So how am I going to do this now? I'm thinking about just playing the move bishop to e3. So that way, if knight to c6, I could play queen to d2, followed by knight c3, and then castle on the queen side. Like that should be fine here. So let's just do that. Let's play bishop e3, developing my pieces normally. The queen will be attacked, and I will just pull it back to d2. And that's why I played bishop to e3, because I want, once my queen is attacked, I'm able to put the queen somewhere where it doesn't really block out my pieces. And I also want to ensure that I keep my queen developed. You know, that's why I didn't pull it back to d1, because eventually I'm going to need to connect my rooks. So once I play knight c3, bishop e2, and castle, I should be fine. Bishop to b4 is very interesting. I could play knight c3. I could also play pawn c3. If pawn c3, there's more than likely he's going to play bishop to a5 and knight c3 followed by pawn to a3. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to play pawn c3 just because it gains the tempo on the bishop, and I'm forcing him to move the bishop again. Like, my initial plan was to play knight c3, queenside castle, but especially since I play c3, I don't think I'm going to castle on the queenside anymore. Now, I want you guys to notice that my knight on b1, it's a bit harder for me to develop my b1 knight. With that being said, I'm actually going to play the move knight a3, which is something that you guys should not do, but I want you guys to understand what I'm doing. The principle says, avoid moving your knight on the edge of the board. Now, a good way to break this principle is to ensure that if you have to put your knight on the edge of the board, it doesn't stay on the edge of the board. My plan with knight a3 wasn't just to develop the knight, it was to get the bishop, especially the bishop pair. So now that he plays pawn d6, I'm able to play knight c4. You notice I didn't keep my knight on the edge of the board, and now once he plays bishop b6, I'm able to take the bishop. And then just like that, we have the bishop pair. Does it mean we're completely just winning the game? Nah, but we have the bishop pair. So from here, it's just going to be regular chess. We're going to be developing the pieces, and maybe we're even going to be bringing the opponent into an endgame and winning, because the bishops gets very strong in the endgame. So let's just play. Okay, I'm thinking about how I may possibly defend against a rook attacking my pawn. That's the thing. So bishop c4, bishop e6, pawn g3. Pawn g3 is kind of weird. I'm not going to lie, but I'm still going to do it. I'm going to just play pawn g3, bishop g2, and castle. Okay, bishop e6, bishop g2, and If he takes the pawn, takes, I'm actually not able to trap the bishop. So let's play pawn a3 to protect that pawn, and then I'm going to play bishop g2 and castle. So I'm going to have to try to outplay my opponent here. Knight e5 would also be a very nice move because, it's kind of punishing me for playing a move like pawn g3 when I could have just developed the bishop in the first place. But ooh, he did play that move. That's interesting. Okay, I'm still gonna play bishop to g2 here, and I think he has the option of playing knight to c4, which means I do not have the bishop here anymore. But my plan was to play queen to d4. It doesn't really hit the knight, but it hits the pawn on g7. So if he takes on b2, then I take on g7, hit the rook, and then castle the king. If he takes on e3, I'm just gonna take with the queen. And now the position is just equal, to be honest. It's just gonna be my moves versus his move. So if black plays all the best move, black will win. If white plays all the best move, white will win. So he got his king out the center of the board, which means he's now trying to capture my pawn on b2. I have to be very careful about my pawn on b2. Okay, I don't really like my position anymore for some reason. But if I have to defend the pawn on b2, might as well I keep the bishop here, to be honest. Let's just keep the bishop here. So that way I'm able to play pawn to b3 and chase away this knight. I'd just like to castle, to be honest. Like once I castle, maybe play b3, pawn c4, bishop b2, I could get some attack on g7. But personally, there's something that I did in the opening that I don't like. Maybe it's g3, maybe it's pulling my queen back to d2. But once I'm not blundering, I should be fine. Especially since he allows me to keep the bishop here, I just need to keep on playing. Like if you have the bishop here, I want you to look on the bishop here like an asset. The longer you hold on to it, the more valuable it is. So with that being said, if we're able to trade all the pieces off the board and I have the two bishops and he has the bishop and the knight, that would be good for me. Now, what I'm expecting him to do is just try everything in his power to make it hard for me to castle. I'm not gonna lie. A move like pawn to c5, I'm kind of afraid of it, but I know deep in my spirit that it's not good. Because if he plays pawn to c5, he's weakening his d6 pawn, and that becomes a backward pawn. So I'd probably just pull my queen all the way back to d1, to be honest. And then if he's not able to play pawn d5, it means he's not able to open the center, and I'm just gonna castle. Okay, queen to d7 was played. He's trying to connect his rooks. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. Usually, bishop to h3 is something that we need to be on the lookout for because it's not threatening. You don't lose the game because of bishop a3. But if black wants to attack your king, it's usually best to trade the fianchetted bishops off the board. Like just trading the fianchetted bishop in general is usually just a good idea. So the knight went back to e5. I think now he wants to play bishop to h3. And I'm thinking about just playing pawn to f4 here and attacking the knight. And then the knight goes back to c6. And then once the knight goes back to c6, I move my queen, let's say to d3. He moves his bishop to h3. But not really seeing exactly what I get from all of that. Maybe I need to just play bishop to f4 or even bishop to e3 and just develop. For example, let's say I play bishop e3, he plays bishop h3, and more than likely I don't need to react to that. So I would just get my rook in the game. Knight to g3, knight to g4. I still need to be on the lookout for. And one thing I could do is play rook e1, bishop h3, bishop h1. That's also a very interesting way to play, just to keep the pieces on the board. And let's actually go for that idea. Like I'm not seeing it losing, and once it's not losing, it should be fine. So now if he plays bishop to h3, I'm gonna play bishop h1. And this is actually an idea that I've taught you guys. I taught you guys this in the Pyrrhic, taught you guys this in the King's Indian. Like any opening that I taught you guys where you fianchetto a bishop, that's a good way for you to hold on to that fianchettoed bishop. Now, bishop to g4 would be a surprising move because if bishop g4, which is what he played, like this guy's playing some chess, to be honest, because now he wants to play knight f3 check, so we have to ensure that we add some defense to the e3 square. So I'm thinking queen e3. Eventually I'm going to chase away his knight, but I just have to be very careful here, to be honest. Maybe rook to e3 is also a move. Queen e3, pawn f5. Okay, rook e3, pawn f5. If f4, he's going to check. Takes, bishop takes. Okay, let's play queen e3 to protect the f3 score. And my next move that I want to play is now going to be f4. And then more than likely, he's going to put his knight on c4 to attack my queen. And I'm going to put the queen back on d4 to attack the knight. Pawn to f5 in this position is a nice move. Like, the only thing that I'm holding on to now is the fact that I have the bishop here. I think black has a nice lead in development because my dark squared bishop is yet to be developed and his rooks are connected and everything. I did play pawn to f5. That's crazy. He did play pawn to f5. Okay, let's play pawn to f4. We have to neutralize the attackers. So pawn to f4 hit the knight, knight c4 hits the queen, and then queen to d4 hits the knight. And once he defends the knight, I actually could take on f5 and then take on b7, but I have no intention of trying to win pawns here. I'm just trying to ensure that I'm safe and I'm able to develop. Like I'm not saying I'm losing. I don't think I'm losing, but I think black's position is fine. Like black at least equalize the position here or it's somewhere close in the negative. But your ability to play chess from lost positions or just position that is uncomfortable, for example, I'm actually not developed here, but I know that my plan is to develop. Like any chance that I get, I'm going to just try to finish my development. I also know that I have some light score weaknesses, but the good thing is I have the light scored bishop, so it's not as bad. But my main goal from here is just to neutralize these attackers as quickly as I possibly can. So he pulls the knight back to c6, which means my queen is not under attack. But it also means he's going to play rook e8 and put his rook on the same line as my queen on the next move. Now I'm thinking about playing pawn to e5 and then after takes, and then once he moves one of the rook on e8, I play e6, and it's just going to be a very annoying pass pawn. It's one of those pass pawn that is very easy to get captured. By the way, oh, actually, let's think about this again. E5 takes, because I don't want him to have the opportunity of playing f4 anytime. If he plays f4, I'm just going to take. Otherwise, I would love to move my queen and put a bishop on the f4 square. I also need to ensure that I complete my development, but I know that he's going to do this. So let's just play pawn to e5. I think if he plays immediate rook e8, then pawn e6 is actually very good for me. I think he needs to take, then go rook e8, and then once I push, he finds somewhere for his queen, and then try to prepare f4 and attack my king. So let's take. Still not developing my dark squared bishop. Usually I'm not going to play a move like bishop to d2. I just don't like a d2 square for my bishop. So he did play rook e8. Let's play e6. I want you guys to look on all these guys' pieces, though. Like, they're doing stuff. This bishop on g4 is also active. I can always play h3 to neutralize the bishop, by the way. But h3, he's just going to pull the bishop back. So not seeing exactly what I get. If I could trade the queens off the board, that could also give me an advantage thanks to my bishop here. So the bishop here is the only thing that I'm holding on to right now. So he did play queen to d6, and the reason why I mentioned that was because I was thinking about playing queen to f4. But now looking on it, if I play queen f4, there's a huge possibility of him just taking here. And then if I take the queen, he takes with the rook. Maybe bishop f4 hits the rook. At that point, I'm down by a pawn, but my development wouldn't be too bad. But he's just going to pull the rook back and then guard his pawn here. Okay. Is there anything else to do though? Like, isn't he just gonna attack my pawn? Maybe pawn to c4 is an idea. I think I'm gonna play pawn c4 and then try to play bishop d5. Like, just try to keep my pawn guarded. Let's try that. Pawn c4, pawn f4. Pawn f4 is actually a pawn sacrifice. I'm not seeing what it does. Pawn c4 allows his knight the d4 square. Not sure if I want to do that just yet. So maybe pawn b4 first. Pawn b4 comes with some ideas of b5. It also comes with ideas of c4, bishop b2. Like, don't get it twisted. I'm still trying to develop my bishop. It's just hard. Now, we're both in some time trouble here. I have 2 minutes on the clock. He also has 2 minutes on the clock. So we're basically in blitz mode here. We just have to ensure that the moves that we play. Oh, wait, what? I actually wasn't expecting him to do it. Like, it was a respectable move. I wasn't expecting him to do it. It's forced though, unless I'm able to play queen e4. Queen e4, I like. Queen e4, pawn f2, and if I take the queen e4, pawn f3, and if I take the bishop, he plays f2, so I have to take. And maybe rook f6 was his. Okay, that was the idea. I completely missed that. The bishop. Maybe I should have played h3. I completely missed that. Completely. This I'm not sure what's happening now because I just missed that. Let's go queen f2. Bishop e3, hopefully. If he takes, I takes. The good thing is everything in my position is guarded, but I don't think the bishop here has anything to do with anything anymore because I'm under attack and I have 1.5 minutes on the clock. I'm just gonna try to speed up now. Rook, if he puts the rook here, okay, bishop back, maybe he wants to go here. God, what do I play? Pawn to c4, maybe bishop to b2 first. Bishop to b2. No, I don't want to do that. Let's play bishop to e3. I want to keep my bishop guarding this pawn. Okay, then he plays this. No, I'm going. Okay, that's actually a weird move though. Let's play rook d1, hit the queen, and if he moves the queen, there's bishop d5, pins the rook. That's crazy. That's a pin. Okay, I need to play fast. I need to play fast. But that's actually very crazy. Once he moves the king, I'll quickly take here. But my light scores are critically weak. Queen takes, especially since he has a check. Let's go bishop d4, discovered attack on the queen. And then once he check, I'll go queen g2, hit the queen, which means my main goal from here is just to start trading the pieces off the board. And the good thing is I'm also applying pressure to his g7 pawn, which is very nice. So bishop g4 is not going to help because I'm also attacking his rook. Okay, he moves the rook. Okay, do I play b4 and hit the... No, let's just trade. Let's just trade. I'm trading off everything. Pawn to b4 trades off everything. He has to trade here because if he moves the knight, which he did, the rook is now left unprotected. And this is not just a discovered attack because my rook is on the same line as his rook. So once I take on g7, his king has to take, and then I'm just going to take the rook and I'll win the game. This is crazy though because I think I was losing the entire game or I was just worse the entire game. But all of a sudden I'm winning. All right, we don't want to be trading too much pawns in the endgame. Let's play here and then take here. We still have to play fast. I'm still gonna have to convert this into a win, and I only have 25 seconds on the clock. So he hits the rook. Okay, this guy plays very strong, but it looks like once he resigns,